Bluffing in poker is a fascinating concept that has been a part of the game since its early days. In the 19th century, poker began to spread across America, and bluffing quickly became a key element of the game. Players realized that they could win not only by having the best hand, but also by convincing their opponents that they did. This strategic deception added a new layer of complexity to the game. The ability to bluff effectively became a sign of a skilled poker player. Over time, bluffing has evolved, but its essence remains the same. It is about creating an illusion, a believable story, that persuades others to fold their hands. Televised poker tournaments have brought many famous bluffing moments to a wide audience. One such moment occurred during the World Series of Poker in 2003. Chris Moneymaker, an amateur player, bluffed his way to victory in a pivotal hand against a seasoned professional. His bold play captured the imagination of viewers and demonstrated the power of bluffing in high-stakes poker. This moment is often credited with sparking a poker boom, as it showed that anyone could win with the right mix of skill and daring. Such televised bluffs have become legendary, inspiring countless players to refine their own bluffing techniques. The psychological thrill of bluffing is a significant draw for many poker players. Outsmarting opponents by convincing them to fold superior hands is a deeply satisfying experience. This aspect of the game challenges players to read their opponents, assess their tendencies, and exploit their weaknesses. The mental battle that unfolds at the poker table is as much about psychology as it is about mathematics and probability. A successful bluff requires confidence and the ability to maintain composure under pressure. Players must project strength and certainty, even when their hand is weak. This delicate balance of acting and strategy is what makes bluffing such an intriguing part of poker. Bluffing can also create a profit margin in long-term play. When executed correctly, bluffs can help players win pots they might otherwise lose. Over time, these additional wins can significantly boost a player's bankroll. However, the key is to bluff selectively and strategically. Bluffing too often can lead to predictability, making it easier for opponents to call your bluffs. Conversely, never bluffing can make you too easy to read, allowing opponents to fold when you have strong hands. The most successful players find a balance, using bluffs to keep their opponents guessing and to capitalize on specific situations. The balance between risk and reward is central to bluffing strategies. Every bluff carries the risk of being called, which can result in losing chips and credibility at the table. However, the potential rewards often justify this risk. A well-timed bluff can win a pot and establish a table image that benefits future hands. Players must weigh the potential gain against the risk of exposure, making calculated decisions based on their opponent's tendencies and the dynamics of the game. This risk-reward calculus is a fundamental part of poker strategy, requiring players to remain adaptable and perceptive. Bluffing in poker is a multifaceted skill that combines historical tradition, psychological insight, and strategic acumen. It is an art form that challenges players to think creatively and act decisively. The thrill of executing a successful bluff, the satisfaction of outsmarting opponents, and the potential for profit make bluffing an essential component of poker. Understanding its nuances and mastering its execution can elevate a player's game, turning the tide in their favor at the most crucial moments. As players continue to explore and refine their bluffing strategies, the art of deception remains a captivating and integral part of poker's enduring appeal. In poker, a pure bluff is a bold move, where a player bets or raises with a hand that has little to no chance of winning if called. The sole aim is to convince opponents to fold better hands. This type of bluff relies entirely on the art of deception. A classic example is when a player with a low pair or even a complete miss on the flop bets aggressively, hoping their opponents believe they hold a strong hand. The success of a pure bluff hinges on the player's ability to sell a convincing story, projecting confidence and strength when holding nothing of value. Semi-bluffs, on the other hand, are more nuanced. They involve betting with a hand that is not currently the best, but has the potential to improve on future streets. For instance, a player with a flush or straight draw may bet on the flop. If the draw completes, the hand becomes strong, and if not, the initial bet still applies pressure on opponents. This dual nature makes semi-bluffs a versatile tool. They combine the elements of aggression and potential, offering a safety net that pure bluffs lack. The possibility of improving to a winning hand adds a layer of security to the bluff, making it a favorite among strategic players. The emotional commitment required for a pure bluff is significant. Players must maintain composure and confidence, even when the stakes are high. The fear of being called and exposed can be daunting, but the thrill of pulling off a successful bluff is unmatched. This emotional weight can influence a player's decision to bluff, as not everyone can handle the pressure of outright deception. It requires a solid understanding of opponents, the ability to read their tendencies, and the courage to follow through with the bluff, regardless of the potential risks. Situational factors play a crucial role in deciding between a pure bluff and a semi-bluff. The dynamics of the table, including the player's tendencies and the stage of the game, can influence this decision. In early stages, when players are more cautious, a semi-bluff might be more effective. In contrast, later stages or when facing tight opponents, a pure bluff could yield better results. The number of opponents also matters. Bluffing into multiple players is riskier than targeting a single opponent. Understanding these factors helps players choose the right type of bluff for the situation. Reading opponents' reactions is key to the success of any bluff. Observing their behavior, bet sizing, and timing can provide insights into their hand strength. A quick call might indicate confidence, while hesitation could suggest uncertainty. Players skilled in reading these cues can adjust their strategy on the fly, deciding whether to continue with their bluff or switch tactics. This adaptability is crucial, as it allows players to exploit weaknesses and capitalize on opportunities as they arise. Board texture is another critical element in bluffing. A dry board with few draw possibilities might be ideal for a pure bluff, as it suggests the bluffer has hit a strong hand. Conversely, a wet board with many draws can support a semi-bluff, as it offers plausible improvement paths. Recognizing how the board interacts with perceived hand ranges allows players to craft believable stories. This understanding of board texture can significantly enhance the effectiveness of both pure and semi-bluffs, turning the tide of a hand in the player's favor. In summary, mastering pure and semi-bluffs involves understanding their distinct characteristics and knowing when to apply each. It requires emotional resilience, keen observation, and strategic thinking. By considering situational factors, reading opponents, and analyzing board texture, players can refine their bluffing techniques. This mastery not only elevates their game, but also adds a layer of depth and excitement to the art of poker. In poker, a player's table image is a silent yet powerful influence. It is the perception others have of you, shaped by your actions, betting patterns, and overall demeanor at the table. This image is not static, it evolves with every hand you play and every decision you make. A well-crafted table image can be your ally, making your bluffs more convincing and your strong hands more deceptive. On the other hand, a poorly managed image can lead to missed opportunities and costly mistakes. Several elements contribute to a player's table image. Aggressive play, characterized by frequent betting and raising, often projects strength and confidence. This can intimidate opponents, making them more likely to fold to your bluffs. However, if overused, it can backfire, as opponents may start calling your bets more often, suspecting bluffs. Conversely, a passive style, marked by frequent checking and calling, might suggest caution or weakness. This can encourage opponents to bluff against you, thinking you lack strong hands. Balancing these styles is key to maintaining an effective table image. The impact of previous hands on your current bluff attempts cannot be overstated. If you have recently shown down a bluff, opponents might be more inclined to call your future bets, thinking you are bluffing again. Conversely, if you've shown strong hands, they might give you more credit and fold more easily to your bluffs. This historical context is crucial in deciding when and how to bluff. Being aware of how your recent actions have shaped your table image allows you to exploit these perceptions strategically. Manipulating your table image intentionally is a skill that can give you a significant edge. By varying your play style and the hands you choose to show, you can craft the narrative you want opponents to believe. For instance, occasionally showing a strong hand after aggressive play reinforces the image of a tight, strong player. Alternatively, showing a successful bluff can sow doubt and make opponents question your future bets. This intentional manipulation can create confusion and uncertainty, making it harder for opponents to read you accurately. The psychological interplay between your image and opponent belief is a dynamic aspect of poker. Opponents are constantly assessing your actions to form a mental picture of your play style. This perception influences their decisions, affecting how they respond to your bluffs and bets. By understanding this psychological aspect, you can anticipate their reactions and adjust your strategy accordingly. This awareness allows you to exploit their beliefs, turning their assumptions into opportunities for profit. Your demeanor at the table also plays a crucial role in shaping your image. Calm and composed behavior can project confidence, while nervousness or agitation might suggest uncertainty. Maintaining a consistent demeanor helps reinforce the narrative you wish to portray. This consistency is especially important when bluffing, as any sign of discomfort can undermine the credibility of your bluff. In summary, a player's table image is a vital component of poker strategy. It is shaped by a combination of play style, previous actions, and demeanor. By understanding and manipulating this image, players can enhance their bluffing effectiveness and overall success at the table. This nuanced aspect of poker adds depth to the game, offering endless possibilities for strategic play. In poker, the position at the table is a crucial element that can significantly influence the outcome of a hand. Acting from a late position offers a strategic advantage that can be particularly beneficial for bluffing. When you are in a late position, such as the dealer button or the cutoff, you have the benefit of observing the actions of most of your opponents before you need to make a decision. This observation period allows you to gather information about their potential hand strengths based on their bets, checks, or raises. This knowledge can be used to craft a more informed and effective bluff. The strategic benefits of acting last in a betting round are manifold. One of the most significant advantages is the ability to control the pace and flow of the game. By acting after your opponents, you can decide whether to increase the pressure with a bet or check to see another card without committing more chips. This control can be leveraged to manipulate the pot size according to your strategic needs, either inflating it when you sense weakness or keeping it manageable when you suspect strength. Late position also allows for better reads on opponents. Since you can see how they act before you make your move, you can pick up on patterns and tendencies that might not be as apparent from an early position. For instance, If an opponent consistently checks when they have a marginal hand, you can use this information to your advantage. You might decide to bluff when they show similar behavior, knowing they are likely to fold to aggression. This ability to read the table and adapt your strategy accordingly is a key component of successful bluffing from late position. There are numerous examples of successful bluffs executed from late position. Imagine a scenario where the flop comes down with low, uncoordinated cards and your opponents check to you. This situation often suggests that they have not connected with the board. From late position, you can capitalize on this by placing a well-timed bet, representing a strong hand. Even if you hold a weak hand, the perception of strength can be enough to make your opponents fold, allowing you to take down the pot without a showdown. The relationship between late position and pot control is another important aspect to consider. When in late position, you have the flexibility to dictate the size of the pot. If you sense that your opponents are weak, you can make a larger bet to apply pressure and potentially force them to fold. Conversely, if you want to keep the pot small, you can choose to check or make a smaller bet, preserving your chips for future opportunities. This ability to control the pot size is particularly valuable in tournaments, where chip management is crucial for long-term success. To maximize bluff potential, while in late position, it is essential to employ certain techniques. One effective method is to use your position to float the flop. This involves calling a bet, with the intention of bluffing on later streets if your opponent shows weakness. For example, if you call a bet on the flop, and your opponent checks to you on the turn, you can seize the opportunity to bluff, representing a hand that improved with the turn card. This tactic can be especially effective against players who tend to give up easily when faced with aggression. Another technique is to pay attention to the betting patterns of your opponents. If you notice that a player frequently bets on the flop, but checks on the turn, you can exploit this tendency by bluffing when they check. This requires careful observation and a willingness to adapt your strategy based on the behavior of your opponents. By staying attuned to these patterns, you can identify the most opportune moments to execute a bluff. In conclusion, acting from a late position provides a significant strategic advantage in poker, particularly for bluffing. The ability to observe your opponent's actions before making a decision allows you to gather valuable information and make more informed plays. By controlling the pot size and employing techniques such as floating the flop or exploiting betting patterns, you can enhance your bluffing effectiveness and increase your chances of success at the poker table. In poker, the board texture is a vital element that can shape the course of a hand. Each board, whether dry or wet, offers distinct opportunities and challenges for bluffing. A dry board, often characterized by high cards like an ace with unconnected low cards, tends to miss most drawing hands. This setup can be ideal for bluffing, as it suggests fewer possibilities for opponents to have connected strongly with the flop. When the board is dry, players can represent a strong hand with a well-timed bet, exploiting the likelihood that opponents have not hit the board. Wet boards, on the other hand, are filled with potential connections. These boards might include sequences or suited cards that offer straight and flush draws. Bluffing on a wet board requires careful consideration. Opponents might have a piece of the board, or be drawing to a strong hand. The challenge lies in assessing how likely it is that they have connected. On such boards, representing a completed draw can sometimes be effective, especially if previous betting suggests a strong hand. Understanding how board texture affects perceived hand strength is crucial. A dry board with an ace can allow a player to represent a top pair convincingly. Conversely, a wet board with several connecting cards can make it harder to bluff convincingly, as opponents might have strong drawing hands. Players must gauge their opponent's tendencies and hand ranges to decide whether a bluff is likely to succeed. Bluffing effectively on various board types involves adapting strategies to the specific texture. On dry boards, a continuation bet after a pre-flop raise can often take down the pot, especially if opponents are unlikely to have hit. On wet boards, a delayed bluff might be more effective. Waiting until the turn or river, when the board has not improved significantly, can create doubt in opponents' minds about the strength of their hands. Adapting bluffing strategies to board changes is another key aspect of successful play. If the board texture shifts dramatically on the turn or river, it might alter the strength of perceived hands. A turn card that completes a potential draw can be a scare card, allowing a player to represent a strong hand. Conversely, if the board remains dry, continuing to represent strength can pressure opponents into folding. Recognizing opponents' likely hand ranges based on the board is essential for crafting effective bluffs. If the board is dry and opponents have checked, it often indicates weakness or a marginal hand. This scenario can be ripe for a bluff. On a wet board, however, players must be more cautious. Opponents might be holding strong draws or made hands. Observing betting patterns and previous actions can provide clues about their likely holdings. In poker, the board texture is a canvas on which players paint their stories. Each card that falls changes the narrative and the potential for deception. By understanding the nuances of dry and wet boards, players can better assess when to bluff and when to hold back. The ability to read the board and adapt strategies accordingly is a hallmark of skilled play. In poker, understanding range advantage and nut advantage can transform a player's approach to the game. Range advantage is about assessing the likelihood of holding stronger hands than your opponents. It involves considering the spectrum of hands you might have compared to theirs. If your range includes more high-value hands, you have a range advantage. Nut advantage, on the other hand, is more specific. It refers to having the best possible hand given the current board, the nuts. Together, these concepts help players make informed decisions about when to bluff and when to play conservatively. When you have a range advantage, it means your potential hands are generally stronger than those of your opponents. This might occur when you raise pre-flop from a strong position, like the button, and the flop doesn't particularly favor your opponent's likely holdings. For instance, if you raise pre-flop and the flop comes with high cards, your range likely includes many strong hands that could connect well, such as high pairs or top pair, top kicker. Your opponent, if they called from the big blind, might have a wider range with weaker connections to the board. Recognizing this advantage allows you to apply pressure through bluffing, knowing that your opponent will have difficulty continuing without a strong hand. Nut advantage is more straightforward. It occurs when you hold the best possible hand given the board. For example, if the board shows a potential flush and you hold the ace of that suit, you have the nut flush. This advantage is potent because it gives you absolute confidence in your hand's strength. When you have the nuts, bluffing becomes unnecessary, but understanding nut advantage can also help you bluff. If you can credibly represent the nuts, you can force opponents to fold hands they might otherwise play. Assessing opponents' ranges is a key skill in poker. It involves interpreting their actions to gauge what hands they might hold. If an opponent checks on a board that seems favorable for continuation betting, it might indicate they have a weak or marginal hand. Conversely, if they raise, it suggests strength. Observing these actions helps you determine whether you have a range advantage. If you believe your range is stronger, you can bluff more confidently, knowing your opponent is unlikely to have a hand that can call. The interplay between bluffing and perceived strength of ranges is a delicate dance. Bluffing is more effective when your perceived range is strong. If you have been playing conservatively and suddenly show aggression, it suggests you have a strong hand. This perception can lead opponents to fold, even if you are bluffing. Conversely, if you have been bluffing frequently, your perceived range weakens, and opponents may call more often. Balancing your play to maintain a strong perceived range is crucial for effective bluffing. Strategies for capitalizing on range and nut advantages involve careful planning and observation. When you have a range advantage, applying pressure through consistent betting can force opponents to fold weaker hands. This strategy works well on dry boards, where opponents are less likely to have connected strongly. With nut advantage, the strategy shifts to extracting maximum value from opponents. However, representing the nuts when you don't have them can be a powerful bluffing tool. If the board suggests a possible straight or flush, and you bet aggressively, opponents may fold even strong hands, fearing you have the nuts. In poker, the ability to assess and leverage range and nut advantages can significantly enhance your bluffing strategy. By understanding these concepts, you can manipulate the game's dynamics, applying pressure when you have the upper hand, and extracting value when you hold the best hand. The art of bluffing is not just about deception, it's about understanding the relative strength of your hand compared to your opponents, and using that knowledge to make strategic decisions. In the world of poker, understanding the distinction between polarized and merged ranges is essential for crafting effective bluffing strategies. A polarized range is one where a player holds either very strong hands or very weak ones. This creates a clear separation, making the range appear extreme. For example, when a player raises on the river, they might be holding either a top-tier hand like a full house or a complete bluff. There is little middle ground. This strategy can be particularly effective when the opponent is likely to fold to aggression, fearing the strong hands in the range. On the other hand, a merged range incorporates hands of varying strengths, including medium-strength holdings. This approach can be used to keep opponents guessing and maintain unpredictability. For instance, a player might bet with top pair, middle pair, and even some bluffs. The goal is to present a more balanced threat, making it difficult for opponents to discern the true strength of the player's hand. This strategy can be particularly effective in situations where opponents are prone to calling with marginal hands, as it capitalizes on their uncertainty. Each range type has its place depending on the table dynamics and the tendencies of opponents. Polarized ranges are often employed in situations where the player wants to apply maximum pressure, especially in heads-up scenarios, or against opponents who tend to fold to aggression. Merged ranges, conversely, are more suitable when playing against opponents who are more likely to call and require a more balanced approach to keep them in the game. Constructing a convincing story with these ranges involves careful consideration of how the hand has played out. With a polarized range, the narrative is straightforward. The player is representing either a monster hand or nothing at all. This can be particularly effective on boards that have not changed much, where a strong hand could have been held from the start. With a merged range, the story is more nuanced. The player must bet in a way that suggests they could have a variety of hands, maintaining a consistent level of aggression that supports the idea of holding a strong but not unbeatable hand. Opponent perception plays a significant role in the choice between polarized and merged ranges. If an opponent perceives a player as overly aggressive, they might be more inclined to call down with weaker hands, making a merged range more effective. Conversely, if a player is seen as tight or conservative, a polarized range might be more believable, as opponents will expect them to have strong hands when they bet aggressively. Transitioning between polarized and merged ranges requires adaptability and a keen sense of timing. Players must be able to read the table and adjust their strategy accordingly. For example, starting with a merged range can help establish a balanced table image, making future polarized bluffs more credible. Alternatively, a player might begin with a polarized approach to test the waters and gauge opponent reactions, then shift to a merged range to exploit any weaknesses observed. Mastering the use of polarized and merged ranges involves not only understanding their definitions, but also knowing when and how to apply them effectively. The art of bluffing is deeply connected to these concepts, as they allow players to manipulate perceptions and control the narrative of the hand. By skillfully employing these ranges, players can enhance their strategic play, keeping opponents off balance and increasing their chances of success at the poker table. Fold equity is a fundamental concept in poker that significantly enhances a player's strategic toolkit. It refers to the likelihood that an opponent will fold their hand in response to a bet or raise. This potential folding action creates an opportunity for players to win the pot without having the best hand. Understanding fold equity is crucial for crafting effective bluffs and maximizing profits in the long run. It allows players to pressure opponents into making decisions that benefit the aggressor, even when the actual hand strength may not be superior. Calculating fold equity involves assessing the probability of an opponent folding based on various factors. These include the size of the bet, the opponent's tendencies, and the current board texture. For instance, a larger bet size may increase fold equity by inducing more folds, especially from opponents who are risk-averse or holding marginal hands. Additionally, understanding an opponent's style, whether they are tight or loose, can help predict their likelihood of folding. Tight players are generally more inclined to fold to aggression, increasing fold equity, while loose players may require more convincing. To maximize fold equity, players often employ aggressive strategies that amplify pressure on their opponents. This can involve making sizable bets or raises that challenge opponents to commit more chips to the pot. The key is to create a scenario where the opponent's decision to call becomes uncomfortable or unappealing. This strategy is particularly effective in situations where the opponent's range is weak or unbalanced, allowing the aggressor to exploit perceived vulnerabilities. The art of maximizing fold equity lies in timing and understanding the table dynamics, ensuring that the pressure applied is both credible and convincing. The relationship between outs and fold equity is another important aspect to consider. Outs refer to the cards remaining in the deck that can improve a player's hand to a likely winner. When a player has outs, they have potential for improvement, which can justify aggressive play. This combination of fold equity and drawing potential creates a powerful dual threat. Even if an opponent calls, the player still has a chance to win by hitting one of their outs. This dual nature of fold equity and drawing potential makes semi-bluffs an attractive option, as they allow players to win in multiple ways. Examples of successful bluffs leveraging fold equity often involve scenarios where the board texture is favorable for aggression. Consider a situation where the board shows a coordinated middle, such as 8, 9, and 10 of different suits. A player could represent a strong hand, like a straight or a set, by betting aggressively, putting pressure on opponents holding weaker pairs or drawing hands. If the opponent believes the aggressor has hit the board strongly, they may fold, granting the bluffing player the pot. This successful bluff hinges on the perceived strength of the aggressor's hand and the opponent's reluctance to continue with a marginal holding. In essence, fold equity is a dynamic and essential component of poker strategy. It empowers players to win pots without the need for the best hand, leveraging psychological pressure and strategic aggression. By understanding how to calculate and maximize fold equity, players can enhance their bluffing repertoire and maintain a competitive edge at the table. The interplay between fold equity, outs, and board texture creates a rich tapestry of decision-making, allowing players to navigate the complexities of poker with finesse and skill. Semi-bluffs are a fascinating aspect of poker strategy that blend aggression with potential for improvement. At their core, semi-bluffs involve betting or raising with a hand that is not currently the best, but has the potential to become strong on future streets. This strategy is particularly effective when holding draws, such as flush draws, straight draws, or even backdoor draws. The beauty of a semi-bluff lies in its dual nature. It provides two ways to win, by making opponents fold weaker hands, or by improving to a strong hand if called. Consider a scenario where you hold a flush draw. The board shows two cards of your suit, and you have two more to complete the flush. In this situation, a semi-bluff can be a powerful move. By betting or raising, you put pressure on your opponents, suggesting you may already have a strong hand. This forces them to make a difficult decision. If they fold, you win the pot immediately. If they call, you still have the chance to hit your flush on the turn or river, potentially winning a larger pot. The psychological impact of representing strong draws cannot be understated. When you bet aggressively with a draw, opponents may perceive you as having a made hand. This perception can lead them to fold hands that might be ahead of your current holding, but are not strong enough to withstand continued aggression. The fear of facing a strong hand can cause opponents to fold, granting you the pot without a showdown. This psychological leverage is a key component of successful semi-bluffing. Assessing the strength of your draw is essential in bluffing scenarios. Not all draws are created equal. A flush draw, or an open-ended straight draw, typically offers more outs and potential than a gut shot or backdoor draw. The more outs you have, the better your chances of improving if called. It's also important to consider the pot odds and implied odds. Pot odds help you determine if a call is mathematically justified, while implied odds consider the potential winnings if you hit your draw. Executing effective semi-bluffs requires timing and understanding of the table dynamics. Early in a hand, when the pot is small, a semi-bluff might not be as effective because opponents are less invested. However, as the hand progresses and the pot grows, the pressure of a semi-bluff increases. It's crucial to observe your opponent's tendencies. Some players are more likely to fold under pressure, while others may call down with marginal hands. Tailoring your semi-bluff strategy to your opponent's tendencies can significantly enhance its effectiveness. Board dynamics play a pivotal role in semi-bluffing. A board that is coordinated or has potential for straights and flushes can be ideal for a semi-bluff. These boards often hit a wide range of hands, making it difficult for opponents to have a strong holding. Conversely, a dry board with little connectivity might not be as effective for a semi-bluff, as opponents can easily read the lack of potential for strong hands. An example of a successful semi-bluff might involve holding an ace and a suited card on a flop showing two cards of your suit. By betting, you represent a strong hand and put pressure on opponents holding weaker pairs or draws. If they fold, you win the pot. If they call, you have the chance to hit your flush, turning your semi-bluff into a value bet on later streets. In summary, semi-bluffs are a versatile and effective strategy in poker, offering multiple paths to victory. By understanding the nuances of draw strength, opponent tendencies, and board dynamics, players can execute semi-bluffs with precision and confidence. This approach not only enhances the potential for immediate wins, but also sets the stage for larger victories when draws come to fruition. In poker, the concept of blockers is a subtle yet powerful tool that can significantly influence bluffing strategies. Blockers are specific cards in your hand that reduce the likelihood of opponents holding certain strong combinations. By holding these key cards, you effectively block potential strong hands your opponents might have, enabling you to craft more convincing bluffs. Understanding the role of blockers adds depth to your strategic arsenal, allowing you to manipulate the game with precision. Consider a situation where you hold an ace in your hand. This card serves as a blocker to the nut flush if the board shows 3 cards of the same suit, and you suspect your opponent might be on a flush draw. The presence of the ace in your hand means there is one less ace available for your opponent to complete a nut flush. This knowledge can embolden you to bluff more confidently, as it decreases the likelihood of your opponent holding the unbeatable hand. Card removal is another aspect that plays into the power of blockers. By having certain cards in your hand, you effectively reduce the combinations of hands your opponents can have. For example, if you hold a king, you remove some of the possible combinations of high pairs or strong suited connectors your opponent might play. This reduction in possibilities can make your bluffs more credible, as opponents are less likely to have the hands they need to call your bets. The strategic value of bluffing with blockers lies in this ability to alter perceived ranges. When you hold cards that block potential strong holdings, you can represent a wider range of strong hands yourself. This representation can lead opponents to fold hands they might otherwise consider calling with. The psychological pressure of facing a possible strong hand can cause opponents to second-guess their decisions, often leading them to fold prematurely. Identifying optimal bluffing hands based on blockers involves careful consideration of the board and your opponent's tendencies. It's essential to recognize which cards in your hand serve as effective blockers and how they interact with the current board texture. For instance, holding a queen on a board with a potential straight can serve as a blocker to the nut straight. This knowledge allows you to bluff with increased confidence, knowing the likelihood of your opponent holding the nuts is reduced. The psychological effect of blockers on opponents' decision-making is profound. When faced with a bet from a player holding potential blockers, opponents may feel trapped in a difficult decision. The presence of blockers can lead them to overestimate the strength of your hand, often resulting in folds. This psychological pressure is a valuable tool in your bluffing strategy, allowing you to control the narrative of the hand and influence opponents' actions. An example of leveraging blockers might involve holding a king and a 10 on a board, showing a queen, jack, and a low card. Here, your king serves as a blocker to the ace-high straight, while your 10 adds further credibility to your potential straight draw. By betting aggressively, you can represent a strong hand, such as a straight or a set, forcing opponents to reconsider their holdings. In essence, the power of blockers in poker lies in their ability to shape opponents' perceptions and decisions. By understanding which cards serve as effective blockers, you can craft bluffs that exploit gaps in opponents' ranges. This strategic layer adds complexity to the art of deception, enhancing your ability to navigate the game with skill and finesse. The subtlety of blockers transforms them into a formidable tool in your poker strategy, providing an edge that can turn the tide in your favor. In the realm of poker, the use of ace and king blockers for river bluffs is a nuanced strategy that can greatly enhance a player's game. These high-ranking cards serve as powerful tools in crafting convincing bluffs, particularly on the river where decisions are often most critical. The concept of blockers revolves around the idea that holding certain cards in your hand reduces the likelihood of your opponents holding strong combinations. When you possess an ace or a king, you effectively decrease the chances that your opponents have the best possible hands, such as a nut flush or a top pair, thus allowing you to represent these strong holdings yourself. Consider a scenario where the board shows a potential flush draw, and you hold an ace of the same suit. This ace acts as a blocker to the nut flush, reducing the possible combinations your opponent can have to complete this strong hand. Similarly, holding a king when the board presents a potential straight can serve as a blocker to the highest possible straight, giving you the leverage to bluff more effectively. These blockers create a narrative of strength, suggesting to your opponents that you might have completed a powerful hand. When crafting a river bluff with ace or king blockers, reading your opponent's ranges becomes crucial. Understanding the range of hands your opponents might hold allows you to determine the likelihood of them having a strong hand. If you hold an ace, for example, and the board suggests a possible flush, you can confidently represent the flush, knowing that the presence of your ace reduces the possibility of your opponent holding the same strong hand. This knowledge empowers you to bet with conviction, applying pressure on your opponents to fold. The texture of the board plays a significant role in the effectiveness of bluffs with ace and king blockers. A dry board, with few potential draws, might not provide the same opportunities for bluffing as a more coordinated board with multiple draws. On a board that has completed a flush or straight draw, having an ace or king blocker allows you to represent a made hand convincingly. The key lies in assessing how the board interacts with the potential hands your opponents might hold, and using your blockers to tell a compelling story. Timing and execution are critical when bluffing on the river with ace or king blockers. The river is often the decisive street in poker, where players must make final decisions based on the information available. A well-timed bluff with a convincing narrative can lead opponents to fold hands they might otherwise call. The presence of an ace or king in your hand adds credibility to your bluff, as it suggests you hold a strong hand that aligns with the board's potential outcomes. In practice, executing a successful river bluff with ace or king blockers involves a careful assessment of the game dynamics. Consider the betting patterns of your opponents and how they have interacted with the board throughout the hand. If an opponent has shown weakness or hesitation, it may be an opportune moment to leverage your blockers for a bluff. The psychological pressure of facing a potential strong hand can cause opponents to fold, allowing you to win the pot without showing down your cards. In essence, the strategic use of ace and king blockers in river bluffs adds a sophisticated layer to poker play. By understanding how these high-ranking cards influence opponents' perceptions, players can craft bluffs that resonate with the narrative of strength. This approach not only enhances the potential for successful outcomes, but also enriches the psychological warfare inherent in the game. The subtle art of bluffing with blockers transforms them into a formidable tool, providing an edge that can decisively shift the dynamics of a hand in your favor. In the world of poker, bet sizing is a delicate art that can profoundly influence the outcome of a hand. The size of a bet is not merely a mathematical decision, but a psychological tool that can shape opponents' perceptions and reactions. When a player chooses a particular bet size, they are crafting a narrative about their hand, suggesting strength, weakness, or uncertainty. Understanding the psychological effects of different bet sizes is essential for any player seeking to master the art of bluffing. Small bets can often be perceived as weakness, or a probing attempt to gather information. They may induce opponents to call with marginal hands or even raise, sensing an opportunity to exploit perceived vulnerability. Conversely, large bets can convey confidence and strength, potentially pushing opponents to fold weaker hands. However, an overly large bet might also raise suspicion, leading opponents to wonder why such a significant amount is necessary if the hand is truly strong. The balance between these perceptions is a subtle dance that requires careful consideration. To align bet sizes with perceived hand strength, players must consider the story they wish to tell. A bet that matches the narrative of a strong hand can reinforce credibility. For example, a player holding a strong hand might bet 3/4 of the pot, suggesting they are seeking value from their holdings. On the other hand, a player bluffing might choose a similar size to mimic this narrative, creating the illusion of strength. The consistency between bet size and hand representation is crucial for maintaining credibility in the eyes of opponents. Table dynamics play a significant role in determining the appropriate bet size. In a game with aggressive players, smaller bets might be seen as opportunities for opponents to pounce, leading to frequent raises. In contrast, a table with more cautious players might respond to larger bets with folds, fearing the potential strength behind them. Understanding the tendencies of the table allows players to adjust their bet sizes strategically, maximizing the effectiveness of their bluffs. Successful bluffs often hinge on the ability to vary bet sizes in a way that aligns with the evolving narrative of the hand. Consider a scenario where a player has been betting consistently on each street, representing a strong hand. On the river, a large bet might seal the deal, convincing opponents of the hand's authenticity. Alternatively, a sudden shift to a smaller bet could suggest a desire to extract value, enticing opponents to call with weaker hands. The ability to adapt bet sizes fluidly is a hallmark of a skilled bluffer. The relationship between bet sizing and the overall narrative of the hand is intricate. Each bet contributes to the unfolding story, shaping how opponents perceive the player's intentions. A well-sized bet can reinforce the player's narrative, lending credibility to their representation of hand strength. Conversely, a poorly chosen bet size can unravel the story, casting doubt and inviting scrutiny. Mastering this aspect of poker requires an understanding of both the mathematical and psychological components of the game. In essence, bet sizing is a powerful tool in the arsenal of any poker player. It is a means of communication, conveying messages about hand strength and intentions. By carefully considering the psychological impact of different bet sizes, players can craft compelling narratives that enhance their bluffing strategies. The art of bet sizing is not just about numbers. It is about telling a story that resonates with opponents, leading them to make decisions that align with the player's objectives. Through thoughtful bet sizing, players can elevate their game, transforming each bet into a strategic statement that influences the dynamics of the table. In the realm of poker, dry flops are a canvas for strategic bluffing. These boards typically feature unconnected and low-ranking cards, lacking the potential for straight or flush draws. Such flops, like King 7-2 with mixed suits, often miss a large portion of players' hands. This characteristic makes them ideal for bluffing, as opponents are less likely to have hit the board. When players see a dry flop, they should consider the likelihood that their opponents have not connected with it, creating a prime opportunity for bluffing. Bluffing on dry flops is particularly effective when opponents are likely to have missed the board. In a scenario where a player raises preflop and faces a call, a dry flop can be advantageous. The preflop raiser can represent a strong hand by continuing with a bet, known as a continuation bet. This move suggests strength, as if the player holds a high pocket pair or a strong king. Opponents who have not connected with the flop may fold, fearing the strength represented by the bet. The simplicity of the board works in the bluffer's favor, as there are fewer combinations of hands that could realistically connect with it. To represent a strong hand on a dry board, players must consider their preflop actions and how they align with the story they wish to tell. A continuation bet on a dry flop can project confidence, suggesting a solid hand like an overpair or top pair. The key is to maintain consistency between the preflop narrative and the actions taken on the flop. For instance, if a player raised preflop from a strong position, such as the button, and then bets on a dry flop, they are telling a convincing story of strength. This narrative pressure can lead opponents to fold, even if the bettor holds a weaker hand. Opponent tendencies play a crucial role in the success of bluffing on dry flops. Understanding how opponents react to continuation bets can inform a player's strategy. Against opponents who frequently fold to continuation bets, bluffing becomes more profitable. Conversely, Against those who often call or raise continuation bets, players must tread carefully. Observing opponents' reactions in previous hands can provide valuable insights into their tendencies. This knowledge allows players to adjust their bluffing strategies accordingly, maximizing their chances of success. Examples of successful bluffs on dry flops often involve a well-timed continuation bet. Imagine a player raises pre-flop with a hand like ace-jack and faces a call. The flop comes queen 6-3, all different suits. The player bets, representing a strong hand like a high pocket pair or a queen. The opponent, holding a hand like 9-8 suited, has missed the flop entirely. Faced with the apparent strength of the continuation bet and the dry nature of the board, the opponent may fold. The bluffer wins the pot without needing to show their cards, capitalizing on the board's texture and the opponent's likely range. Dry flops offer a fertile ground for bluffing, leveraging the board's simplicity to create pressure on opponents. By understanding the characteristics of dry flops and the strategic opportunities they present, players can enhance their bluffing repertoire. The art of deception thrives on these boards, where the absence of draws and connections allows for compelling stories of strength. Recognizing opponent tendencies and aligning actions with the narrative of a strong hand can lead to successful bluffs, turning the simplicity of dry flops into a powerful tool in a player's arsenal. In poker, the turn card holds a special significance in the art of bluffing. This second community card can shift the dynamics of a hand, offering fresh opportunities for players to apply pressure. A double-barrel bluff involves making a second bet on the turn after having already bet on the flop. This strategy can be particularly effective when the turn card aligns well with the story a player is trying to tell. By continuing the narrative of strength, players can push opponents into difficult decisions, often leading them to fold strong but vulnerable hands. To assess whether a turn card favors your range, consider the pre-flop and flop action. If you raised pre-flop and bet on a flop like 8-5-2 with mixed suits, a turn card such as a king can be favorable. This card complements the story of holding high cards or a strong pair. It is crucial to evaluate how the turn card interacts with the perceived range you represent. If the turn card strengthens the narrative of having a strong hand, it becomes a prime candidate for a double-barrel bluff. Conversely, if the turn card does not align well with your perceived range or strengthens your opponent's likely holdings, caution is advisable. Executing an effective double-barrel bluff requires careful attention to bet sizing and timing. The size of your turn bet should be consistent with the strength you wish to portray. A well-sized bet can suggest confidence and compel opponents to fold weaker hands. Additionally, timing plays a crucial role. A swift and decisive bet can reinforce the perception of strength, whereas hesitation might invite suspicion. The goal is to maintain the pressure applied on the flop, creating a seamless narrative that convinces opponents of your hand's power. The psychological impact of continued aggression on opponents cannot be understated. Consistent betting across multiple streets can create doubt and fear in the minds of opponents. They may question the strength of their own hands, especially if they hold marginal holdings. The pressure of facing another bet can lead them to fold hands they might otherwise consider calling. This psychological warfare is a key element of the double-barrel bluff, turning the tide in favor of the aggressive player. Examples of successful double-barrel bluffs often involve turn cards that enhance the perceived strength of the aggressor's range. Consider a scenario where a player raises pre-flop with ace-10 and bets on a flop of 7-4-3. The turn brings a queen, a card that can easily fit into the narrative of holding a strong hand like ace-queen or king-queen. By betting again on the turn, the player reinforces the story of having a top pair or better. An opponent holding a hand like pocket sixes may find it difficult to continue, fearing they are up against a superior holding. The double-barrel bluff succeeds by leveraging the favorable turn card and the opponent's uncertainty. In another context, imagine a player who raised pre-flop and bet on a flop of Jack 9-6 with 2 hearts. The turn is a 10 of spades, completing a potential straight but also fitting into the story of holding a strong hand, like King-Queen or Ace-King. By betting again, the player pressures opponents who may have called the flop with draws or weaker pairs. The turn card, in this case, serves as a narrative enhancer, convincing opponents that the aggressor holds a strong hand. The art of the double-barrel bluff lies in the ability to read the board, assess the turn card's impact on perceived ranges, and execute with precision. By understanding when and how to apply this strategy, players can create compelling narratives that lead to successful bluffs. The interplay of turn cards and continued aggression adds depth to the game, making the double-barrel bluff an essential tool in a poker player's arsenal. In the world of poker, the river card is a decisive moment. It is the final opportunity for players to define their hand and influence the outcome. Triple-barrel bluffs on the river can be particularly powerful. They involve betting across all 3 streets, pre-flop, flop, and turn, culminating in a decisive bet on the river. This strategy is high risk but can yield substantial rewards when executed with precision and insight. The river card often completes the story a player has been crafting throughout the hand. It can either solidify the narrative of a strong holding or expose the bluff for what it is. The key to a successful triple-barrel bluff lies in the ability to maintain a coherent and believable story from the start. This begins with the pre-flop action, where a player might raise to indicate strength. On the flop, a continuation bet can reinforce this narrative, suggesting a solid hand. The turn bet must align with the evolving story, keeping pressure on opponents. Finally, the river bet acts as the climactic point, where the story either convinces opponents to fold or falls apart. Understanding the dynamics of river cards is crucial. A river card that fits the narrative of a strong hand can be a powerful tool. For instance, if a player has been representing a flush draw, the appearance of a third card of the same suit on the river can complete the story. Similarly, if the player has been suggesting a straight, a connecting card can enhance the bluff's credibility. The selection of river cards that align with the perceived range is essential for the bluff to succeed. Constructing a convincing narrative across all 3 betting rounds requires attention to detail and consistency. Each bet must serve a purpose, reinforcing the story being told. Opponents will be assessing the credibility of each action, looking for inconsistencies or signs of weakness. A well-constructed narrative leaves little room for doubt, compelling opponents to fold even potentially strong hands. Assessing opponents' likely responses to triple-barrel bluffs involves understanding their tendencies and the context of the game. Some players are more inclined to call down with marginal hands, while others are more cautious and prone to folding under pressure. Observing opponents' previous actions and reactions can provide valuable insights into how they might respond to a river bluff. Players who have shown a tendency to fold in earlier hands may be more susceptible to a triple-barrel bluff. The risks associated with triple-barrel bluffs are significant. Betting across all 3 streets requires a substantial investment, and if the bluff is called, the player risks losing a large portion of their stack. However, the rewards can be equally substantial. Successfully executing a triple-barrel bluff can win a sizable pot and establish a table image of aggression and unpredictability. This image can be leveraged in future hands, making opponents more cautious and prone to folding. Examples of successful triple-barrel bluffs often involve a deep understanding of opponents' psychology and the ability to read the table dynamics accurately. Consider a scenario where a player raises preflop with a hand like King-Jack and continues to bet on a flop of Queen 10-4. The turn is a low card, like a 3, and the player bets again. The river brings an ace, a card that fits the narrative of a strong hand like Ace-King or Ace-Queen. By betting on the river, the player pressures opponents who may have been calling with hands like pocket pairs or weaker queens. The ace on the river completes the story, convincing opponents that the player holds a superior hand, leading them to fold. In another example, a player might raise preflop with a suited connector like 8-7 and continue betting on a flop of 9-6-2. The turn is a 5, adding a straight draw to the narrative. The river brings a 10, completing the potential straight. By betting again, the player suggests they have hit the straight, compelling opponents to fold hands like top pair or overpairs. The art of the triple barrel bluff involves a delicate balance of risk and reward. By understanding the dynamics of river cards, constructing a believable narrative, and assessing opponents' likely responses, players can execute this high-stakes strategy effectively. The thrill of a well-timed triple barrel bluff adds an exhilarating dimension to poker, showcasing the depth and complexity of the game. In the world of poker, large overbets are a fascinating strategy. They involve betting more than the size of the current pot, creating significant pressure on opponents. This tactic can force them into difficult decisions, often leading to folds. The strategic purpose of large overbets is to capitalize on capped ranges. These are situations where opponents are unlikely to have the strongest hands. By applying intense pressure, players can exploit this vulnerability. Overbetting is most effective when opponents have shown weakness. This might be through a check or a small bet on earlier streets. It can also work when the board texture suggests that opponents are unlikely to hold strong hands. For example, on a board with low disconnected cards, an overbet can suggest a powerful hand. This can lead opponents to fold even medium-strength holdings. Reading opponents' reactions to large bets is crucial. Some players may become visibly uncomfortable, hesitating or fidgeting. These signs can indicate they are not confident in their hand. Others might quickly fold, unwilling to risk a large portion of their stack. Observing these reactions can provide valuable insights into when overbetting is likely to succeed. Executing overbets while maintaining credibility requires careful planning. The story told by the player's actions must be consistent. If a player has been aggressive throughout the hand, a large overbet can fit the narrative of a strong holding. Conversely, if a player has been passive, suddenly making a large bet can appear suspicious. Consistency in betting patterns helps maintain credibility. There are several techniques for executing overbets effectively. One approach is to use them sparingly. Overusing this tactic can make it less believable. Players should select spots where the board texture and opponent tendencies align. Another technique is to consider the timing of the bet. Making an overbet quickly can convey confidence, while a delayed bet might suggest uncertainty. Successful bluffs utilizing large overbets often involve a deep understanding of opponents' psychology. For instance, consider a player who has observed an opponent folding to large bets in previous hands. In this scenario, the player raises preflop with a hand like Ace-5 suited. The flop comes King 9-3, a relatively dry board. The opponent checks, and the player bets a standard amount. The turn is a 2, and the opponent checks again. Sensing weakness, the player overbets the pot. The opponent folds, unable to call with a marginal hand. In another example, A player might face an opponent who tends to call down with top pair. The player holds a hand like Queen 10 suited, and the flop is Jack 8-4. The opponent bets, and the player calls. The turn is a 7, adding a straight draw. The opponent bets again, and the player calls. The river is a king, completing a potential straight. The opponent checks, and the player overbets the pot. The opponent, fearing the straight, folds top pair. The psychology behind large overbets is a key factor in their success. They create fear and uncertainty, forcing opponents to question their hand strength. This tactic can be particularly effective against players who are risk-averse or inexperienced. The pressure of facing a large bet can lead them to make mistakes, folding hands they might otherwise play. Large overbets add a thrilling dimension to bluffing. They require a blend of strategic insight and psychological awareness. When executed well, they can be a powerful tool in a player's arsenal. The art of using large overbets lies in the balance of aggression and credibility, creating moments of tension and excitement at the poker table. In the world of poker, understanding the concept of minimum defense frequency is crucial. This principle helps players decide how often they should call bets to avoid being exploited by aggressive opponents. When a player folds too often, they become predictable, allowing others to bluff them easily. By maintaining the right balance between calling and folding, players can keep their opponents guessing. This balance is not just about calling every hand, but knowing when a call is necessary to protect against bluffs. Calculating minimum defense frequency involves a simple formula. It is based on the size of the bet relative to the pot. For example, if an opponent bets half the pot, the minimum defense frequency is about 67%. This means a player should continue with their hand about 67% of the time, either by calling or raising. This calculation helps ensure that opponents cannot profitably bluff every time. The idea is to make sure that the cost of bluffing is too high for the opponent. Balancing bluffs with strong hands is also a key component of this strategy. By mixing strong hands with bluffs in a player's range, they can maintain unpredictability. This makes it difficult for opponents to determine whether a player is bluffing or holding a strong hand. A balanced range forces opponents to make mistakes, as they cannot simply fold to aggression without consequence. This blend of bluffs and value hands keeps the game dynamic and engaging. Identifying when to bluff versus when to call is an art that requires keen observation. Players must pay attention to opponents' tendencies and betting patterns. If an opponent is frequently aggressive, it might be an indication that they are bluffing often. In such cases, calling more frequently could be beneficial. Conversely, if an opponent is more conservative, they might only bet with strong hands, suggesting that folding more often is the better strategy. Recognizing these patterns allows players to adjust their defense frequency accordingly. Examples of balanced strategies incorporating minimum defense frequency can be seen in various scenarios. Consider a player facing a river, bet on a board with a missed flush draw. The opponent bets 3/4 of the pot. The player knows their opponent is capable of bluffing in this spot. By calculating the minimum defense frequency, the player decides to call with a medium-strength hand, such as a second pair. This decision is based on the understanding that folding too often would allow the opponent to bluff profitably. In another instance, a player might be in a situation where they have a strong hand, like top pair with a good kicker. The opponent bets the pot on the flop. The player is aware that their opponent tends to bluff frequently in these situations. By using the minimum defense frequency, the player decides to call and keep the opponent's range wide. This decision not only protects against bluffs, but also maximizes value from weaker hands the opponent might hold. The balance between aggression and defense is a critical aspect of successful poker play. Players who master this balance can effectively counter aggressive opponents while maintaining their own unpredictability. By understanding minimum defense frequency, players can make more informed decisions at the table. This knowledge allows them to protect their chips and capitalize on opponents' mistakes. The art of balancing aggression with strategic defense adds depth to the game, making it both challenging and rewarding. In the realm of poker, pot odds serve as a guiding light for decision-making, particularly when contemplating a bluff. Pot odds represent the ratio of the current size of the pot to the size of the bet you must call. This calculation helps players decide whether a call or bluff is mathematically justified. Understanding pot odds is crucial for making informed decisions that can lead to profitable outcomes over time. It is a blend of math and intuition that informs a player's strategy at the table. To calculate pot odds, a player must first determine the total pot size and the bet they are facing. For example, if the pot is $100 and the opponent bets $50, the total pot becomes $150. The pot odds are then 3-1, as the player must call $50 to win $150. This ratio provides a framework for deciding whether a bluff or call is worthwhile. The player must consider their hand's potential to improve and the likelihood of opponents folding to a future bet. Bluffing frequency is intricately linked to pot odds. When players understand their pot odds, they can better gauge how often they need to bluff to make their strategy profitable. A higher pot odds ratio suggests that the player can afford to bluff more frequently, as the cost of failure is lower compared to the potential reward. Conversely, when pot odds are low, the player must be more selective with their bluffs, as the risk of losing chips outweighs the potential gain. This balance is essential for maintaining a solid bluffing strategy. Using pot odds to inform bluffing strategies requires a keen understanding of the game's dynamics. Players must consider not only the pot size and bet amounts, but also their opponent's tendencies and the context of the hand. For instance, if a player is facing a tight opponent who rarely calls large bets, they might use favorable pot odds to execute a bluff, knowing the opponent is likely to fold. Conversely, against a loose player who calls frequently, the same pot odds might suggest a more conservative approach, avoiding bluffs that are less likely to succeed. Successful bluffs grounded in pot odds calculations often involve a combination of strategic foresight and precise execution. Consider a scenario where a player holds a drawing hand on the turn with a flush draw. The pot is $200 and the opponent bets $50. The player calculates the pot odds as 4-1. Given the potential for their hand to improve and the likelihood of the opponent folding to a river bet, the player decides to call and prepare for a bluff on the river if the flush does not complete. This calculated risk, informed by pot odds, can lead to a successful bluff that capitalizes on the opponent's uncertainty. Another example involves a player who faces a river bet on a dry board. The pot is $300 and the opponent bets $100. The player calculates the pot odds as 3-1. Recognizing that their opponent's range is polarized, containing either very strong hands or bluffs, the player decides to execute a bluff raise, representing a strong hand themselves. This decision, backed by favorable pot odds, pressures the opponent into folding their weaker holdings, resulting in a successful bluff. The relationship between pot odds and bluffing is a dance of numbers and psychology. By integrating pot odds into their decision-making process, players can enhance their strategic depth and improve their overall game. The ability to calculate and interpret pot odds allows players to navigate the complexities of poker with greater confidence and precision. It is a skill that, when mastered, can transform the art of bluffing into a powerful tool for success at the poker table. In poker, the check raise is a powerful maneuver that can shift the dynamics of a hand. It involves a player first checking to their opponent, inviting a bet, and then responding with a raise. This unexpected increase in aggression can unsettle opponents, forcing them to reassess their hand's strength. The check raise is most effective when the player can convincingly represent a strong hand. This move is not just about the cards, but about the story being told at the table. The mechanics of a check raise involve timing and a keen understanding of the opponent's tendencies. By checking initially, the player appears passive, suggesting weakness or uncertainty. When the opponent bets, they often perceive the check as an invitation to take control of the pot. The subsequent raise disrupts this perception, indicating that the initial check was a trap. This move works best against opponents who are prone to continuation betting, as they are more likely to fall into the check-raise trap. Situations where check-raise bluffs shine are those where the board texture supports the narrative of a strong hand. For example, if the board shows a pair, a check-raise can suggest trips. Similarly, on a board with potential straight or flush draws, a check-raise can represent a made hand or a strong draw. The key is to ensure that the board conditions align with the story being told. Opponents must believe that the player holds a hand worthy of such aggressive action. Constructing a believable story with a check raise requires attention to detail and consistency. Players must consider their previous actions in the hand and how they align with the current move. If a player has been playing passively, a sudden check raise can be more convincing, as it fits the narrative of a trap being sprung. Conversely, if a player has been aggressive throughout, a check raise might seem out of character, potentially tipping off opponents to the bluff. The psychological impact of a check raise on opponents can be significant. It forces them to reconsider their position and evaluate the strength of their hand against the perceived strength of the player's hand. This pressure can lead to mistakes, such as folding a better hand or overcommitting with a weaker one. The uncertainty introduced by a check raise can disrupt an opponent's strategy, creating opportunities for the player to capitalize on their hesitation. Successful check raise bluffs often occur in scenarios where the opponent is unlikely to have a strong hand. For instance, if the player knows the opponent often bets with marginal hands or draws, a check raise can effectively push them off the pot. Consider a situation where a player holds a weak hand on a board showing a pair of eights. The opponent bets, and the player check raises, suggesting they hold trips. If the opponent has a marginal hand, they may fold, fearing the strength the player represents. Another example involves a board with a potential flush draw. The player checks, and the opponent bets, possibly with a drawing hand or a weak pair. The player then check raises, representing a made flush or a strong draw. The opponent, wary of the potential strength, may fold their hand, allowing the player to win the pot without needing the best cards. The art of the check raise bluff lies in its ability to create doubt and pressure. By understanding when and how to use this tactic, players can add a valuable tool to their bluffing arsenal. The check raise is not just about the immediate hand, but about setting a tone for future interactions at the table. When executed with precision and confidence, it can be a decisive move that turns the tide in a player's favor. In the world of poker, the donk lead is an intriguing move. It involves betting into the pre-flop raiser from an earlier position, disrupting the natural flow of betting. This tactic can unsettle opponents, especially those accustomed to controlling the action. The term donk lead suggests a move that seems unconventional or even unwise. Yet when executed with precision, it can be a powerful weapon in a player's arsenal. The strategic purpose of a donk lead is to seize control of the hand, challenging the preflop raiser's perceived strength. By leading out, the player sends a message that they have connected well with the board, forcing the raiser to reassess their position. Donk leads are most effective in specific situations. One such scenario is when the board texture is particularly favorable to the player leading out. For example, on a low and coordinated board, a donk lead can represent a wide range of strong hands, such as 2 pairs or a set. This move can pressure the preflop raiser, who may have missed the board entirely. Another situation where donk leads shine is when playing against opponents who are overly aggressive with continuation bets. By leading out, the player can disrupt their rhythm, forcing them to make difficult decisions. This tactic can be particularly effective in multiway pots, where the preflop raiser's range is often weaker due to the presence of additional players. Reading opponents' reactions to donk leads is crucial for their success. A quick call might suggest that the opponent has a drawing hand or a marginal made hand, while a raise could indicate strength or an attempt to bluff. Observing timing and bet sizing can provide further insights into their intentions. If an opponent hesitates before calling or raising, it might signal uncertainty or weakness. Conversely, a swift and confident raise could suggest strength or a bluff designed to reclaim control of the hand. Understanding these nuances allows the player to adjust their strategy accordingly, either by continuing to apply pressure or by exercising caution. Executing donk-led bluffs with credibility requires careful consideration of the narrative being constructed. The player must ensure that their actions align with the story they are telling. For instance, if the board texture suggests a possible flush or straight, the donk lead should reflect the potential of holding such a hand. Bet sizing also plays a crucial role in maintaining credibility. A small bet might invite a raise, while a larger bet can signal strength and deter aggression. The key is to strike a balance that convinces the opponent of the player's hand strength, while leaving room for maneuverability. Examples of successful donk lead bluffs often involve situations where the opponent is caught off guard by the unexpected aggression. Consider a scenario where the board shows a low, uncoordinated flop, and the player leads out with a modest bet. The preflop raiser, holding 2 high cards, may fold, fearing a set or 2 pairs. In another instance, the player might lead out on a board with a possible flush draw, representing a made flush. The opponent, holding a marginal hand, may fold to avoid further investment in a potentially losing situation. These examples highlight the effectiveness of donk lead bluffs in creating doubt and pressure. The donk lead, when used judiciously, can be a valuable addition to a player's strategic repertoire. It challenges the conventional wisdom of poker, offering a fresh perspective on hand dynamics. By understanding the contexts in which donk leads thrive and mastering the art of reading opponents, players can incorporate this tactic into their bluffing strategies. The element of surprise and the psychological impact of a well-timed donk lead can turn the tide of a hand, adding an unexpected twist to traditional play. In the world of poker, pro betting on the turn is a subtle yet effective tactic. It involves placing a bet after the opponent has checked on the turn, especially when they have previously shown aggression with a continuation bet on the flop. This move allows the player to regain control of the hand, shifting the narrative in their favor. The turn is a pivotal moment in poker, as it often clarifies the direction a hand is taking. By implementing a pro bet, players can apply pressure, forcing opponents to reconsider their positions and potentially fold weaker holdings. The art of pro betting lies in its ability to disrupt the opponent's expectations, creating opportunities for strategic advantage. Pro bets are particularly effective in certain situations. One such scenario is when the board texture changes significantly on the turn. For instance, if the flop was dry and the turn introduces a draw, a probe bet can represent a newfound strength. This shift can make opponents wary, especially if they have checked, indicating a lack of confidence in their hand. Another ideal situation for a probe bet is when the opponent has shown weakness by checking after a missed continuation bet. This hesitance can signal that they have not connected well with the board, making them susceptible to pressure. By seizing the initiative, the player can exploit this vulnerability, often forcing folds from marginal hands. Assessing opponents' likely responses to a probe bet is crucial for its success. A quick call might suggest that the opponent has a drawing hand or a marginal made hand, while a raise could indicate strength or an attempt to bluff. Observing the opponent's body language or timing in live games can provide additional insights. In online play, the speed of their response can be telling. A hesitant call might imply uncertainty, whereas a swift raise could suggest confidence. Understanding these nuances allows the player to adjust their strategy, deciding whether to continue applying pressure or to proceed with caution. The size of a probe bet is another critical factor in its effectiveness. A well-sized bet can maximize pressure, making it difficult for opponents to continue without a strong hand. Generally, a probe bet should be large enough to make opponents reconsider their holdings, but not so large that it commits the player unnecessarily. A bet size of around 50 to 75% of the pot often strikes this balance, creating enough tension without overextending. The key is to maintain credibility, ensuring that the bet aligns with the narrative of strength being portrayed. Examples of successful probe bets often involve situations where the opponent is caught off guard by the unexpected aggression. Consider a scenario where the board shows a harmless flop, and the opponent checks the turn after missing their continuation bet. The player then places a well-sized probe bet, representing a potential strong hand or draw. The opponent, holding a marginal hand, may fold, fearing a stronger holding. In another instance, the player might probe bet on a turn that completes a possible draw, suggesting they have hit their hand. The opponent, wary of the new board texture, may fold a hand they initially believed was strong. The probe bet, when used judiciously, can be a valuable addition to a player's strategic arsenal. It challenges the conventional flow of betting, offering a fresh perspective on hand dynamics. By understanding the contexts in which probe bets thrive and mastering the art of reading opponents, players can incorporate this tactic into their bluffing strategies. The element of surprise and the psychological impact of a well-timed probe betard can turn the tide of a hand, adding an unexpected twist to traditional play. In the realm of poker strategy, delayed continuation bets offer a unique approach to influencing the flow of a hand. This tactic involves postponing the continuation bet until a later street, often the turn, to create an impression of strength. By not betting immediately after the flop, players can sow seeds of doubt in their opponents' minds, making it appear as though they are biding their time with a strong hand. The strategic rationale for this delay lies in its ability to exploit opponents' assumptions and create opportunities for profitable bluffs. Identifying the right moment to execute a delayed continuation bet is crucial. This decision often hinges on the texture of the flop and the tendencies of the opponents. A board that is dry, with few draws or high cards, may not warrant an immediate bet, as it is unlikely to have connected with opponents' ranges. By checking, the player can gauge their opponent's reactions and gather information. If the turn card changes the board dynamics, introducing potential draws or scare cards, it can become an optimal moment to place a delayed bet. This shift can suggest newfound strength, compelling opponents to fold marginal hands. The effectiveness of delayed continuation bets is closely tied to board texture. Dry boards, which lack connectivity and high cards, often allow for more flexibility in delaying a bet. When the board is unlikely to have improved an opponent's hand, the player can afford to wait and see how the turn develops. Conversely, on a wet board with many draws, delaying a bet can be risky, as opponents may gain confidence from the additional equity in their hands. Understanding these nuances helps players decide when a delayed bet is likely to succeed. Constructing a believable story with delayed bets requires careful consideration of the hand's progression. The player must ensure that their actions align with the narrative they wish to portray. For instance, if the flop is checked, and the turn brings a high card or completes a draw, a delayed bet can convincingly suggest a strong hand. This approach can make opponents hesitant to call, fearing they are up against a superior holding. The key is consistency, maintaining a line of play that supports the illusion being crafted. Successful examples of delayed continuation bets often involve scenarios where opponents are caught off guard by the unexpected aggression on later streets. Consider a situation where a player checks the flop on a dry board, leading opponents to believe they have a weak hand. When the turn introduces a scare card, the player places a delayed bet, representing a strong holding. Opponents wary of the new board texture may fold hands they initially believed were strong. In another instance, a player might delay their bet on a board that becomes more coordinated on the turn, suggesting they have hit a draw. The opponent, uncertain of their position, may choose to fold rather than risk further investment. Delayed continuation bets, when executed with precision, can be a powerful addition to a player's strategic toolkit. They challenge the conventional rhythm of betting, offering a fresh perspective on hand dynamics. By understanding the contexts in which delayed bets thrive and mastering the art of reading opponents, players can incorporate this tactic into their bluffing strategies. The element of surprise and the psychological impact of a well-timed delayed bet can turn the tide of a hand, adding an unexpected twist to traditional play. Bluff catching is a fascinating aspect of poker strategy, where the goal is to detect and counter opponents' bluffs with well-chosen hands. This approach requires a keen understanding of the game and the ability to read subtle cues from opponents. By selecting hands that effectively block their best potential holdings, players can improve their chances of winning without needing to overcommit. The art of bluff catching lies in the balance between aggression and defense, creating a dynamic interplay that enriches the strategic landscape of poker. The concept of bluff catching hinges on the idea of calling an opponent's bet with a hand that might not be the strongest, but is still capable of winning against a bluff. This strategy is significant because it allows players to capitalize on their opponent's tendencies to overbluff, thereby turning the tables in their favor. Successful bluff catching requires a deep understanding of hand ranges and the ability to identify situations where opponents are likely to be bluffing. By accurately assessing these scenarios, players can make informed decisions that enhance their overall gameplay. Identifying hands that block opponents' strongest bluffs is a crucial component of bluff catching. These hands, often referred to as blockers, reduce the likelihood that opponents hold certain strong cards. For example, holding an ace in your hand can block the possibility of your opponent having a top pair if an ace is on the board. Similarly, having a card that completes a potential flush or straight can deter opponents from bluffing with those specific draws. By recognizing these blocking cards, players can increase their confidence in calling bluffs and make more profitable decisions. Situational factors play a significant role in bluff-catching decisions. The dynamics of the table, including the number of players involved and their betting patterns, can influence the likelihood of a bluff. In heads-up situations, where only two players are involved, the chances of encountering a bluff are often higher due to the increased frequency of aggressive play. Conversely, in multi-way pots with several players, the probability of a bluff diminishes, as players tend to play more conservatively. Understanding these dynamics helps players decide when bluff catching is most viable. Techniques for reading opponents to determine bluffing frequency are essential for effective bluff catching. Observing opponents' betting patterns, timing, and physical tells can provide valuable insights into their intentions. Players who frequently bet or raise in certain situations may be more prone to bluffing, while those who exhibit hesitation or uncertainty might be more inclined to fold. By paying attention to these cues, players can develop a sense of their opponent's bluffing tendencies and adjust their strategy accordingly. Examples of successful bluff catches often involve situations where players have accurately assessed their opponent's tendencies and made well-timed calls. Consider a scenario where a player faces a large river, bet on a board showing a potential flush. By holding a card that blocks the flush draw, the player can confidently call, knowing that the opponent's range is likely to include bluffs. In another instance, a player might call a turn bet with middle pair on a dry board, recognizing that the opponent often overbluffs in similar situations. These successful bluff catches demonstrate the power of understanding opponents and leveraging that knowledge to make profitable decisions. Bluff catching is a skill that combines intuition, observation, and strategic thinking. By mastering this approach, players can enhance their ability to navigate complex situations and turn potential losses into gains. The interplay between aggression and defense in bluff catching adds depth to the game, allowing players to explore new dimensions of strategy. As players refine their bluff catching techniques, they can gain a significant edge over opponents, transforming the art of deception into a powerful tool for success at the poker table. In the world of poker, adapting your strategy to exploit the tendencies of weaker opponents can be incredibly rewarding. Recognizing the patterns and habits of these players allows you to tailor your approach, maximizing opportunities for profitable bluffs. Weaker opponents often exhibit predictable behaviors, which, when identified, can be used to your advantage. Understanding these tendencies is the first step in crafting a strategy that effectively exploits them. One common weakness in less experienced players is a tendency to play too many hands. This overcommitment can lead to situations where they hold weaker ranges, making them more susceptible to well-timed bluffs. By observing their frequency of participation in hands, you can gauge their likely hand strength. This knowledge allows you to apply pressure when they are least likely to have a strong holding, increasing the chances of a successful bluff. Another tendency is the inclination to chase draws without proper pot odds. Weaker players often fall into the trap of hoping for a miracle card, even when the odds are against them. By recognizing this pattern, you can adjust your betting strategy to extract maximum value from their hopeful calls. Larger bets on draw-heavy boards can discourage them from continuing, or if they do call, it can lead to a more significant payoff when they miss their draw. Predictable betting patterns are also a hallmark of weaker opponents. Some players might bet small with strong hands and large with bluffs, or vice versa. Identifying these patterns can provide a clear roadmap for when to bluff and when to fold. By paying attention to the size and timing of their bets, you can determine their likely hand strength and adjust your strategy accordingly. To exploit these patterns, consider employing a strategy that includes varied bluffing techniques. For instance, against an opponent who bets small with strong hands, you might choose to raise aggressively, representing an even stronger hand. Conversely, if they tend to overbet as a bluff, calling with a wider range can capitalize on their mistakes. The key is to remain adaptable and responsive to the specific tendencies you observe. Examples of successful bluffs against weaker opponents often involve taking advantage of their predictable behaviors. Imagine a scenario where a player consistently bets large on the river as a bluff. By calling with a marginal hand, you can expose their tendency and win the pot. In another situation, a player might fold too often to continuation bets. Recognizing this, you can increase your bluffing frequency on the flop, knowing they are likely to concede the pot. The psychological aspect of exploiting weaker opponents adds an intriguing layer to the game. Outsmarting an opponent by predicting their actions and countering them effectively can be deeply satisfying. This dynamic not only enhances your strategic depth, but also increases your confidence at the table. As you become more adept at reading and exploiting these tendencies, your ability to bluff successfully will improve, leading to greater overall success in the game. By focusing on the specific weaknesses and tendencies of weaker players, you can refine your bluffing strategy to exploit these opportunities fully. The art of deception becomes even more potent when tailored to the predictable patterns of your opponents. As you hone this skill, you will find that outsmarting less experienced players not only boosts your profits, but also enriches your overall poker experience. In the intricate world of poker, understanding game theory optimal GTO bluff frequencies is a vital component of strategic play. It forms the backbone of a balanced approach, ensuring that players are neither too predictable nor too aggressive. At its core, GTO bluffing is about maintaining a frequency of bluffs that prevents opponents from exploiting your strategy. This balance is achieved by calculating the optimal number of bluffs relative to your value bets. By adhering to these calculated frequencies, players can create a game plan that is both robust and adaptable. The concept of GTO bluff frequencies revolves around the idea of balance. In poker, balance means having a mix of bluffs and value bets that make it difficult for opponents to discern your strategy. If a player bluffs too often, opponents may call more frequently, undermining the effectiveness of the bluffs. Conversely, if a player bluffs too rarely, opponents may fold too often, missing opportunities to capitalize on their mistakes. GTO bluff frequencies aim to strike the perfect equilibrium, allowing players to maximize their returns while minimizing risks. Calculating optimal bluffing frequencies involves understanding hand ranges. A hand range represents the spectrum of possible hands a player might hold in a given situation. By analyzing these ranges, players can determine how often they should bluff to maintain balance. For example, in a particular scenario, if a player bets with both strong hands and bluffs, the ratio of bluffs to value bets should be carefully calibrated. This ensures that opponents cannot easily exploit the player's strategy by adjusting their own play. The interplay between bluffing and value betting is a critical aspect of GTO strategy. Value betting involves wagering with strong hands to extract maximum value from opponents. In contrast, bluffing aims to make opponents fold superior hands. The key to GTO strategy is to blend these elements seamlessly, creating a narrative that keeps opponents guessing. By integrating bluffs with value bets in a balanced manner, players can maintain a level of unpredictability that enhances their overall effectiveness. To maintain balance while bluffing, players must be aware of their own tendencies and those of their opponents. This requires a keen understanding of the game's dynamics and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. For instance, if an opponent is particularly aggressive, a player might adjust their bluffing frequency to counteract this behavior. Conversely, against a more passive opponent, a player might increase their bluffing frequency to exploit their tendency to fold. The ability to adapt and maintain balance is a hallmark of skilled poker play. Examples of successful GTO-based bluffing strategies often involve a careful blend of aggression and restraint. Consider a scenario where a player is facing a decision on the river. By calculating the pot odds and assessing the opponent's likely range, the player can determine the optimal bluffing frequency. If the opponent's range is weak, a well-timed bluff might induce a fold, securing the pot. However, if the opponent's range is strong, the player might opt for a more conservative approach, preserving chips for future opportunities. In another example, a player might be in a situation where their range is perceived as strong. By incorporating a calculated number of bluffs into their strategy, they can maintain balance and keep opponents on their toes. This approach not only enhances the player's ability to win pots, but also prevents opponents from easily reading their hand strength. The art of balancing bluffs with value bets is a dynamic process that requires constant evaluation and adjustment. In the realm of poker, mastering GTO bluff frequencies is an ongoing journey. It demands a commitment to understanding the nuances of hand ranges, opponent tendencies, and game dynamics. By embracing this approach, players can create a solid foundation for their strategy, ensuring they remain competitive in any setting. The balance between aggression and strategic restraint is not only a key to successful bluffing, but also a pathway to long-term success in the game. In the world of live poker, timing tells offer a subtle yet powerful glimpse into the minds of opponents. These tells, often unnoticed by the untrained eye, can provide valuable insights into a player's intentions and the strength of their hand. By paying close attention to the timing of actions, players can gather information that enhances their bluffing strategies. The art of reading timing tells is an essential skill for anyone looking to gain an edge at the poker table. Timing tells are significant because they reveal the subconscious habits and reactions of players. In a game where every decision is crucial, the time taken to make a move can speak volumes. A swift bet might indicate confidence or a strong hand, while a prolonged hesitation could suggest uncertainty or weakness. By observing these patterns, players can make more informed decisions, tailoring their strategies to exploit the information gleaned from their opponent's timing. Common hesitation patterns include pauses before betting, checking, or calling. A player who takes a long time to act might be contemplating a bluff or weighing the risk of a call. Conversely, a quick decision often signals a prepared plan or a strong hand. Recognizing these patterns allows players to adjust their own strategies accordingly. For example, if an opponent consistently hesitates before folding, a well-timed bluff might pressure them into making a mistake. Interpreting timing tells accurately requires practice and keen observation. Players must remain. This involves watching for consistent behaviors and understanding the context of each decision. For instance, a player who normally acts quickly but suddenly hesitates might be facing a challenging decision. This pause could indicate a potential bluffing opportunity for an astute observer. Using your own timing to mislead opponents is another layer of strategy in live poker. By varying the speed of your actions, you can create uncertainty and manipulate perceptions. A deliberate pause before a bet might suggest weakness, prompting opponents to call with marginal hands. Alternatively, a rapid bet could convey strength, encouraging opponents to fold. Mastering this technique involves knowing when to break from your usual pattern to achieve the desired effect. There are many examples of successful bluffing based on timing tells. Consider a scenario where an opponent takes an unusually long time to check on the river. This hesitation might suggest they are contemplating a bluff or trying to induce a bet. Sensing this, a player could seize the moment to execute a bluff of their own, exploiting the opponent's uncertainty. In another instance, a player might notice that an opponent who usually bets quickly takes extra time before making a large bet. This deviation could indicate a bluff, allowing the player to call with confidence. Timing tells are not foolproof, and relying solely on them can be risky. However, when combined with other information, such as betting patterns and physical tells, they become a valuable tool in a player's arsenal. The key is to remain flexible and adaptable, using timing tells as part of a broader strategy. By honing this skill, players can enhance their ability to read opponents and make more strategic decisions. The world of live poker is rich with opportunities for those who can decipher the subtle language of timing tells. This skill, while challenging to master, can provide a significant advantage at the table. By understanding the nuances of timing and incorporating them into bluffing strategies, players can elevate their game and enjoy the thrill of outsmarting their opponents. The journey to mastering timing tells is one of observation, practice, and keen intuition, adding depth to the art of poker. In the world of poker, physical tells serve as a silent conversation between players. These tells, often subtle and fleeting, can provide invaluable insights into an opponent's hand strength or intentions. Understanding and interpreting these physical cues can enhance a player's strategic edge, turning the poker table into a stage where every gesture and movement holds potential meaning. The art of reading physical tells is a skill that combines observation, intuition, and experience. Physical tells are the involuntary or deliberate actions that players exhibit during a hand. These can range from nervous gestures to confident postures, each offering clues about the player's mindset. For instance, a player might fidget with their chips when bluffing, indicating nervousness. Conversely, a relaxed demeanor might suggest confidence in a strong hand. Recognizing these patterns requires keen observation and an understanding of human behavior. Common nervous gestures often indicate weakness or uncertainty. A player might touch their face, tap their fingers, or avoid eye contact when bluffing. These actions can betray a lack of confidence or an attempt to conceal anxiety. On the other hand, deliberate overacting, such as exaggerated size or overly confident movements, can also be a sign of bluffing. Players may use these tactics to mislead opponents, adding layers of complexity to the game. Observing and interpreting body language is a nuanced skill that develops over time. It involves paying attention to both the obvious and the subtle, from the way a player handles their chips to their posture at the table. A player leaning forward might be more engaged and confident, while one who leans back could be trying to appear relaxed despite holding a weak hand. The key is to look for deviations from a player's usual behavior, as these can indicate a change in their strategy or mindset. Using physical tells to enhance your own bluffing strategies involves a degree of self-awareness and control. By managing your body language, you can project confidence or feign uncertainty to manipulate opponents' perceptions. For example, maintaining a calm and steady demeanor while bluffing can make your play appear more credible. Conversely, adopting nervous gestures when holding a strong hand can encourage opponents to misjudge your strength, leading them to make mistakes. There are numerous examples of successful bluffs influenced by physical tells. Consider a scenario where a player notices an opponent consistently rubs their neck when bluffing. By picking up on this tell, the player can confidently call a bluff in a crucial hand, turning the tide in their favor. In another instance, a player might deliberately exhibit a nervous gesture, such as tapping their foot, while holding a strong hand. This can mislead opponents into thinking a bluff is at play, prompting them to call and ultimately lose. The world of poker is a complex interplay of strategy and psychology, where physical tells add an intriguing layer to the game. By mastering the art of reading and interpreting these cues, players can gain a significant advantage at the table. The challenge lies in discerning genuine tells from deliberate misdirection, a skill that requires patience, practice, and a keen eye for detail. The ability to incorporate physical tells into a broader strategy enhances a player's capacity to bluff effectively, creating opportunities for deception that can lead to substantial rewards. In poker, the dance of body language is ever present, offering a silent narrative that complements the spoken and unspoken strategies at play. The journey to mastering physical tells is one of continuous learning and adaptation, where each game provides new insights and opportunities for growth. As players hone their skills in reading and utilizing physical tells, they deepen their understanding of the intricate dance of deception that defines the game of poker. In the world of poker, silence and table talk serve as subtle yet powerful tools in the art of bluffing. The quiet moments at the table can speak volumes, influencing how opponents perceive a player's hand. Silence can create an aura of mystery, leaving others to fill in the gaps with their assumptions. This absence of verbal cues forces opponents to rely on their intuition and observations, often leading them to second-guess their initial reads. The strategic use of silence can make a player's hand appear stronger or weaker, depending on the desired effect. By maintaining a composed and quiet demeanor, players can project confidence, suggesting they have nothing to prove or defend. This calmness can be unsettling to opponents, as it disrupts the usual flow of information they rely on to make decisions. Table talk, on the other hand, introduces an active element to the psychological game. A well-timed comment or question can shift the dynamics of a hand, influencing how opponents perceive the situation. Engaging in conversation can serve multiple purposes. It can distract, mislead, or even provoke a reaction that reveals valuable information. Players skilled in table talk use their words to weave a narrative that supports their bluffing strategy. They may choose to chat casually, creating a relaxed atmosphere that lulls opponents into a false sense of security. Alternatively, they might employ more pointed remarks to sow doubt or confusion. The key is to tailor the conversation to the specific context and the personalities at the table. Emotional calm is a critical component in both silence and table talk. Maintaining composure under pressure enhances credibility, making bluffs more believable. When a player appears unaffected by the stakes or the unfolding action, it suggests a level of control and confidence. This demeanor can lead opponents to question their own judgments, potentially leading them to make mistakes. Emotional calm also helps players avoid giving away unintended tells through nervousness or excitement. By staying grounded, they can focus on executing their strategy without betraying their intentions. Verbal cues play a significant role in bluffing success. The tone, pace, and content of table talk can all contribute to the narrative a player wishes to convey. A slow, deliberate speech pattern might suggest careful consideration and strength, while a quick, casual tone could imply indifference or weakness. Players can use these verbal nuances to reinforce the story they are telling with their actions. For instance, a player holding a weak hand might adopt a confident, assertive tone to suggest strength, while a player with a strong hand might downplay their position through modest or self-deprecating remarks. There are numerous examples of successful bluffs enhanced by strategic communication. Consider a scenario where a player facing a tough decision asks their opponent a seemingly innocuous question about a previous hand. The response, whether verbal or non-verbal, might provide insights into the opponent's current mindset or hand strength. In another instance, a player might use humor to diffuse tension, creating a relaxed environment that encourages opponents to lower their guard. This can lead to missteps, such as calling a bluff they might otherwise have folded to. The interplay between silence and table talk adds a rich layer to the psychological aspects of poker. By mastering these elements, players can craft a convincing narrative that supports their bluffing strategy. Whether opting for the quiet strength of silence or the strategic engagement of table talk, the goal remains the same: to influence opponents' perceptions and decisions. The art of bluffing is as much about what is unsaid as it is about the words chosen. This delicate balance of communication and restraint can turn the tide of a hand, creating opportunities for deception that lead to victory. In the world of online poker, the dynamics of bluffing take on a distinct character due to the digital nature of the game. The absence of physical presence means players must rely on different cues and strategies to execute successful bluffs. One of the unique aspects of online poker is the anonymity it provides. Without the ability to observe physical tells, players must depend on betting patterns, timing, and other digital signals to gain insights into their opponent's strategies. This anonymity can be a double-edged sword. It offers the freedom to bluff without the fear of giving away physical tells, but it also requires a deeper understanding of the virtual environment. Population tendencies in online poker can be a valuable resource for crafting effective bluffing strategies. Many players fall into predictable patterns, especially at lower stakes where recreational players are more common. These tendencies can include overvaluing certain hands, playing too passively, or calling too frequently. By identifying these patterns, skilled players can exploit them to their advantage. For instance, if a player notices that their opponents frequently fold to large bets, they can adjust their strategy to include more aggressive bluffing in those situations. Understanding the general tendencies of the player pool can provide a strategic edge that is crucial for successful online bluffing. Reading opponents in an anonymous environment requires a keen eye for detail and a focus on the subtleties of the game. Without physical tells, players must rely on the timing of bets, bet sizing, and the speed of decision-making. For example, a quick call might indicate a drawing hand, while a long pause followed by a bet could suggest a bluff. Observing how opponents react to different board textures and betting sequences can also provide valuable insights. By piecing together these clues, players can build a profile of their opponent's tendencies and adjust their bluffing strategies accordingly. Adjusting bluffing strategies based on online dynamics involves a flexible approach that takes into account the specific characteristics of the digital setting. Players must be aware of the potential for multi-tabling, where opponents play multiple games simultaneously. This can lead to more straightforward play, as players focus on volume rather than intricate strategic adjustments. Additionally, the use of software tools and tracking programs in online poker can influence how players approach bluffing. Understanding the capabilities and limitations of these tools can help players refine their strategies and avoid becoming predictable. Examples of successful online bluffs often involve exploiting the specific dynamics of the virtual environment. Consider a scenario where a player notices that their opponent consistently folds to continuation bets on dry boards. By leveraging this tendency, the player can increase their bluffing frequency in these situations, knowing that the opponent is likely to fold. In another example, a player might observe that an opponent bets aggressively when check to on the river. By setting up a situation where they check with a strong hand, the player can induce a bluff from their opponent and capitalize on their aggressive tendencies. The thrill of deception in online poker adds a fresh layer to the game, challenging players to adapt their strategies to the unique characteristics of the digital landscape. By understanding population tendencies, reading opponents in an anonymous environment, and adjusting their approach based on online dynamics, players can craft effective bluffing strategies that enhance their overall success. The art of bluffing in online poker is a testament to the adaptability and creativity of players who navigate the complexities of the virtual world with skill and finesse. Bluffing in multiway pots is a nuanced endeavor, requiring a strategic shift from the more straightforward dynamics of heads-up play. When several players are involved in a hand, the complexity increases, and so does the challenge of executing a successful bluff. Each additional player in the pot adds another layer of uncertainty, as the likelihood that someone holds a strong hand increases. This means that the chances of a bluff succeeding diminish, as more players are available to call or raise, To navigate these crowded waters, a player must be more selective and strategic in their approach. One of the primary challenges of bluffing in multi-way pots is the diversity of potential hands and ranges that players might hold. With more players, the probability that someone has connected with the board in some way is higher. This requires a careful assessment of the board texture and the likely holdings of each opponent. Dry boards, which are less coordinated and offer fewer potential draws, might present better bluffing opportunities. In contrast, wet boards with multiple straight or flush possibilities can be more dangerous, as they increase the likelihood that someone has a strong hand. Despite the challenges, there are situations where bluffing in multi-way pots can still be effective. For example, if the action checks through to a player in late position, this can signal weakness from the other players. In such a scenario, an aggressive bet might convince opponents to fold, especially if they perceive the bettor as having a strong hand. Another opportunity might arise if a player has shown strength on previous streets and can continue to represent a powerful hand. This can create pressure on opponents, forcing them to fold marginal holdings. Assessing the strength of opponents' ranges in multi-way scenarios is crucial. Observing their actions and betting patterns can provide valuable insights into their likely holdings. For instance, a player who has been passive throughout the hand may not be willing to call a large bet without a strong hand. Conversely, a player who has shown aggression might be more likely to continue in the pot. By carefully analyzing these dynamics, a player can make more informed decisions about when to bluff. Position plays a significant role in bluffing within multi-way pots. Being in a late position allows a player to observe the actions of others before deciding on their move. This information can be invaluable, as it helps determine whether the conditions are right for a bluff. A player in late position can take advantage of any signs of weakness from opponents, using the power of position to apply pressure effectively. Additionally, controlling the pot size from a favorable position can make it easier to execute a bluff without overcommitting. Successful bluffs in multi-way pots often involve a combination of timing, position, and a keen understanding of opponents' tendencies. For instance, a player in the cutoff might notice that the players in the blinds are playing conservatively. By betting aggressively, the player can exploit this tendency, pushing opponents to fold their weaker hands. Another example might involve a player who has been representing a strong hand throughout the hand. By continuing this narrative, especially on a scare card, the player can force opponents to reconsider their holdings and potentially fold. In conclusion, bluffing in multi-way pots requires a delicate balance of aggression and caution. The increased number of players makes it more challenging to succeed, but with careful observation and strategic positioning, it is possible to find opportunities. Understanding the dynamics of multi-way pots and leveraging position effectively can turn the complexities of these scenarios into an advantage. By mastering these techniques, players can add a powerful tool to their poker arsenal, enhancing their ability to navigate the intricate landscape of multi-way bluffs. In the intense world of tournament poker, short stack play presents a unique set of challenges and opportunities. When players find themselves with dwindling chips, the pressure mounts, and every decision carries significant weight. Bluffing becomes a crucial tool in these situations, offering a way to claw back into contention. The art of bluffing with a short stack requires precision and timing, as the margin for error is slim. Players must choose their moments wisely, understanding that a well-executed bluff can shift the momentum and alter the course of the tournament. The dynamics of short stack play are distinct from those of deeper stacks. With fewer chips, the options for play are limited, and the focus often shifts to survival and strategic aggression. In these scenarios, bluffing can serve as a lifeline, allowing players to pressure opponents without having the best hand. The key lies in recognizing the right situations to deploy a bluff. Often this involves assessing the table dynamics and identifying opponents who are likely to fold under pressure. One situation where bluffing becomes essential is when a player is nearing the blinds and antes. As the blinds increase, the cost of staying in the game rises, making it imperative to take action. A well-timed bluff can steal the blinds and provide a much-needed boost to a short stack. This requires a keen understanding of opponent tendencies and a willingness to act decisively. By observing which players are more conservative or risk-averse, a short-stacked player can exploit these tendencies to their advantage. Applying pressure on opponents with a short stack is an art form. It involves creating a narrative that suggests strength, even when the cards do not support it. This can be achieved through a combination of bet sizing, timing, and table image. A small stack can still project confidence by making bold moves that put opponents in difficult positions. For example, a well-executed all-in bet can force opponents to reconsider their hands, especially if they are also playing cautiously. The psychological impact of chip counts on opponents' decisions cannot be overstated. Players with larger stacks may feel less inclined to risk their chips against a short stack, especially if they perceive the short stack as desperate or willing to gamble. This perception can be leveraged to create successful bluffs. By understanding how opponents view their own position relative to the short stack, a player can craft strategies that exploit these psychological dynamics. The threat of elimination looms large in tournaments, making opponents more susceptible to folding under pressure. Examples of successful short-stack bluffs abound in tournament history. One memorable instance might involve a player who, facing elimination, pushes all in with a marginal hand. The bold move forces opponents to fold, allowing the short stack to survive and eventually thrive. Another scenario could involve a player bluffing on a scare card, convincing opponents that they have hit a strong hand. These moments highlight the power of strategic deception and the ability to turn the tide with limited resources. In conclusion, bluffing with a short stack in tournament poker is a delicate balance of risk and reward. The stakes are high and the pressure is palpable, but the potential for a successful bluff to change the trajectory of a tournament is immense. By understanding the unique dynamics of short stack play and leveraging psychological insights, players can navigate this challenging landscape with skill and finesse. The thrill of executing a well-timed bluff when every chip counts adds an exhilarating dimension to tournament play, showcasing the artful blend of strategy and psychology that defines poker at its best. In the world of poker, the final table is where the stakes reach their peak and every decision becomes critical. At this juncture, the independent chip model, or ICM, plays a pivotal role. ICM is a mathematical model used to determine a player's equity in a tournament based on their chip count relative to the remaining players. This model influences decision-making by highlighting the monetary implications of each move. As players approach significant pay jumps, the pressure intensifies, and the dynamics of the game shift dramatically. Understanding ICM is essential for navigating these waters, as it affects both aggression and caution at the table. The influence of ICM is most evident when considering pay jumps. As players near the final stages of a tournament, the differences in prize money between positions become more pronounced. This creates a scenario where players are incentivized to play more conservatively, aiming to outlast others rather than accumulate chips aggressively. This tendency can be exploited through strategic bluffing. By recognizing when opponents are likely to tighten their play due to ICM considerations, savvy players can apply pressure at opportune moments. The fear of losing out on a higher payout can lead opponents to fold hands they might otherwise call. Identifying optimal bluffing opportunities under ICM pressure requires keen observation and timing. Players must assess the stack sizes of their opponents and consider the current payout structure. Opponents with medium stacks might be more inclined to fold, protecting their position in the tournament. In contrast, short stacks might be more desperate, willing to gamble to avoid elimination. Large stacks may also feel less threatened and more willing to call. By understanding these dynamics, players can tailor their bluffing strategies to exploit the specific tendencies of their opponents. The psychological effects of ICM on player behavior are profound. The knowledge that each decision could significantly impact potential earnings adds a layer of stress and caution to the game. Players may become more risk-averse, avoiding confrontations that could jeopardize their tournament life. This mindset can be leveraged through well-timed bluffs. By projecting confidence and aggression, a player can capitalize on the hesitation and fear that ICM pressure instills in opponents. The art of deception becomes a powerful tool in these tense moments, allowing players to manipulate the flow of the game. Examples of successful bluffs under ICM pressure are plentiful in poker history. Consider a scenario where a player with a medium stack faces a raise from a larger stack. The medium stack, aware of the ICM implications, decides to re-raise all-in with a marginal hand. The larger stack, wary of risking a significant portion of their chips, folds, allowing the medium stack to win the pot uncontested. This move, driven by an understanding of ICM dynamics, highlights the potential for strategic deception to yield substantial rewards. Another example might involve a player on the final table bubble, where the next elimination will lead to a significant pay jump. Recognizing that opponents are likely to play cautiously, the player seizes the opportunity to bluff aggressively. By doing so, they pressure opponents into folding, securing valuable chips and improving their position. The ability to exploit ICM pressure in this way demonstrates the strategic depth and psychological acuity required to succeed in high-stakes poker. ICM adds a layer of complexity to final table play, transforming each decision into a calculated risk with financial implications. The tension of navigating these dynamics creates an environment ripe for strategic bluffing. By understanding how ICM influences player behavior and identifying moments of hesitation, players can employ fearless bluffs to gain an edge. The interplay between aggression and caution under ICM pressure showcases the intricate balance of poker strategy, where every move is a step toward potential victory or defeat. In the world of poker tournaments, the bubble is a pivotal moment that carries a unique tension. It is the stage where the next player to be eliminated will miss out on the prize money, making every decision fraught with pressure. This looming threat of elimination alters the dynamics at the table, as players become more cautious, eager to secure a spot in the money. The fear of being the last one out before the payouts begin creates an atmosphere ripe for strategic bluffing. Players who can navigate this tension, using it to their advantage, can often find success through well-timed deception. During bubble play, the behavior of players shifts noticeably. Many become more risk-averse, opting to protect their chip stacks rather than engage in confrontations that could lead to their downfall. This defensive mindset can be exploited by astute players who recognize the opportunity to apply pressure. Bluffing becomes particularly effective in this environment, as the fear of elimination makes opponents more likely to fold marginal hands. The key is to identify those players who are most affected by the bubble pressure, often those with medium stacks who are close to the payout threshold. Situations where bluffing is most effective during the bubble often involve players who are visibly tense or hesitant. These players are likely weighing the consequences of each decision, aware that a single mistake could cost them a payout. By observing body language and betting patterns, a player can gauge who is feeling the pressure most acutely. A well-timed bluff against such an opponent can lead to a fold, allowing the bluffer to accumulate chips without showing down a strong hand. The art of reading these subtle cues and acting on them is a skill that can turn the tide in a tournament. Techniques for applying pressure during the bubble revolve around creating a narrative of strength. By projecting confidence and aggression, a player can sow doubt in the minds of opponents. This might involve making larger bets or re-raises that suggest a willingness to risk it all, even if the hand itself is not particularly strong. The psychological impact of such moves can be profound, as opponents may fold hands they would otherwise consider playing. The balance between aggression and survival is delicate, requiring a keen sense of timing and an understanding of opponents' tendencies. Stack sizes play a crucial role in determining bluffing opportunities during the bubble. Players with large stacks can afford to be more aggressive, leveraging their chip advantage to pressure shorter stacks. Conversely, players with small stacks might be more desperate, willing to gamble in hopes of doubling up. Medium stacks, however, often find themselves in a tricky position, trying to survive the bubble without taking unnecessary risks. These dynamics create fertile ground for bluffing, as players with medium stacks are often the most susceptible to folding under pressure. Examples of successful bubble bluffs abound in poker lore. Consider a scenario where a player with a healthy stack raises preflop, only to be met with a re-raise from a medium stack. Recognizing the bubble dynamics, the healthy stack player decides to push all in, representing a strong hand. The medium stack, aware of the risk of elimination, folds, allowing the aggressor to claim the pot uncontested. This move, driven by an understanding of the bubble's psychological impact, showcases the power of strategic bluffing. Another example might involve a player who notices an opponent consistently folding to aggression during the bubble. Sensing an opportunity, the player waits for a moment when the opponent is in the big blind with a medium stack. The player then raises aggressively, knowing that the opponent is likely to fold rather than risk their tournament life. The ability to exploit such tendencies can lead to significant chip gains, providing a crucial edge as the tournament progresses. The bubble is a defining moment in any tournament, where the fear of missing out on the money can lead to cautious play. By understanding the dynamics at play and recognizing opportunities to bluff, players can capitalize on this tension. The art of deception becomes a powerful tool, allowing players to navigate the bubble with skill and confidence. The strategic landscape of bubble play offers rich opportunities for those willing to embrace the challenge and outmaneuver their opponents. In the realm of heads-up poker, the game transforms into a unique battle of wits and strategy. With only one opponent to consider, the dynamics of play shift significantly. This environment offers a wider range of bluffing opportunities, as players can focus intensely on their rivals' tendencies. The reduced number of players means that hands are played more frequently, and the need for adaptability becomes paramount. The essence of heads-up poker lies in its intensity, where every decision carries weight, and the potential for deception is ever present. Understanding the unique characteristics of heads-up poker is essential for mastering bluffing in this format. The lack of additional players means that hand ranges are broader, and the likelihood of strong starting hands is reduced. This creates an environment where aggression and creativity can thrive. Players must be willing to engage in frequent bluffs, as the absence of extra opponents makes it easier to isolate and exploit a single player's weaknesses. The game becomes a dance of psychological warfare, where reading an opponent's behavior and adjusting strategies accordingly is crucial. Adjusting bluffing frequencies based on opponent tendencies is a vital skill in heads-up play. Observing how often an opponent folds to aggression or calls down with weak holdings can inform a player's approach. If an opponent tends to fold frequently, increasing bluffing frequency can be profitable. Conversely, if they call often, a more value-oriented strategy might be effective. The key is to remain flexible, adapting to the evolving dynamics of the match. By staying attuned to an opponent's patterns, players can exploit their tendencies and maximize their bluffing success. Creating pressure and exploiting weaknesses in heads-up play involves a combination of aggression and timing. Players can apply pressure by making substantial bets or raises that force difficult decisions. This might involve betting large on the flop or turn to represent a strong hand, even if the actual holding is weak. The psychological impact of such moves can lead opponents to fold hands they might otherwise play. Timing is crucial, as well-timed bluffs can disrupt an opponent's rhythm and create opportunities for chip accumulation. The psychological interplay between two players in a bluffing scenario adds depth to heads-up poker. Each player is acutely aware of the other's actions and reactions, creating a dynamic where mind games are prevalent. Bluffing becomes a tool for sowing doubt and uncertainty, as players attempt to manipulate their opponent's perceptions. The tension of one-on-one play heightens the stakes, making every bluff a calculated risk. Understanding an opponent's psychological state can guide decisions, allowing players to choose moments of vulnerability to strike with deception. Examples of successful bluffs in heads-up matches often highlight the importance of timing and observation. Consider a scenario where a player notices their opponent frequently folding to aggression on the river. Sensing an opportunity, the player decides to bluff on a seemingly innocuous river card, representing a strong hand. The opponent, wary of past encounters and the potential strength, folds, allowing the bluffer to claim the pot. This move, driven by a keen understanding of the opponent's tendencies, showcases the power of strategic bluffing. Another example might involve a player who identifies an opponent's reluctance to call large bets without a strong hand. Recognizing this tendency, the player increases their bluffing frequency, making larger than usual bets. The opponent, unable to consistently defend against the aggression, folds more often, leading to significant chip gains for the bluffer. This ability to exploit an opponent's weaknesses is a hallmark of successful heads-up play. Heads-up poker is a thrilling arena where the art of bluffing can shine. The one-on-one nature of the game demands adaptability and keen observation, as players seek to outmaneuver their opponent. By understanding the unique dynamics of heads-up play and adjusting strategies accordingly, players can harness the power of deception to gain an edge. The psychological battles and strategic depth of heads-up poker make it a captivating challenge for those who embrace the intensity of the game. In the quiet intensity of a poker game, 3-bet pots emerge as a unique arena for strategic bluffing. The action begins with a player raising preflop, followed by another player's re-raise, known as a 3-bet. This sequence signifies strength and narrows the range of hands each player might hold. The dynamics of 3-bet pots create an environment where bluffing requires precision and a deep understanding of opponent tendencies. The tighter ranges involved mean players must carefully consider their moves, balancing aggression with the potential strength of their opponent's hands. In 3-bet scenarios, the opportunity for bluffing is not as frequent as in single-raised pots. The initial re-raise suggests a level of confidence and hand strength, which can deter bluffing attempts. However, there are still moments when bluffing can be viable. These situations often arise when a player perceives weakness in their opponent's response to the 3-bet. For example, if an opponent hesitates before calling the 3-bet, it may indicate uncertainty about their hand's strength. This hesitation can be a signal for the aggressive player to consider a bluff, particularly if the board texture is favorable for representing strong holdings. Techniques for reading opponents' ranges in 3-bet scenarios involve paying close attention to their actions and betting patterns. The initial 3-bet often represents a range of strong hands, such as high pairs or strong Broadway cards. Observing how an opponent reacts to the 3-bet, whether they call or 4-bet, can provide insights into their likely holdings. A quick call might suggest a willingness to see the flop with a drawing hand, while a long pause followed by a call could indicate a marginal holding. By piecing together these clues, players can better assess when a bluff might succeed. Position and stack sizes play a crucial role in 3-bet bluffing. Being in position allows a player to act last, providing the advantage of observing opponents' actions before making a decision. This information can be invaluable when deciding whether to continue with a bluff. A player with a larger stack may also feel more comfortable applying pressure, knowing they can absorb potential losses. Conversely, a player with a smaller stack might be more conservative, as their ability to recover from a failed bluff is limited. Understanding these dynamics helps players tailor their bluffing strategies to the specific context of the hand. Examples of successful bluffs in 3-bet pots often highlight the importance of timing and board texture. Consider a player who 3-bets pre-flop with a suited connector, such as 9-8 of hearts. The flop comes down with 2 hearts and a king, creating a potential flush draw. The initial raiser checks, and the 3-better decides to continue with a bet, representing a strong king or even a set. The opponent, wary of the potential strength, folds, allowing the bluffer to claim the pot without showing their cards. This move, grounded in careful observation and strategic aggression, demonstrates the power of a well-timed bluff in a 3-bet pot. Another scenario might involve a player who notices their opponent frequently folds to continuation bets after calling a 3-bet preflop. Sensing an opportunity, the player 3-bets with a marginal hand, such as ace-jack offsuit. The flop comes down with low, uncoordinated cards, and the player bets again, representing an overpair. The opponent, unable to withstand the pressure, folds, and the bluffer takes down the pot. This ability to exploit an opponent's tendencies is a hallmark of effective bluffing in 3-bet scenarios. Bluffing in 3-bet pots requires a delicate balance of aggression and caution. Players must navigate the complexities of these situations with a keen eye for detail and a willingness to adapt their strategies. By understanding the dynamics at play and carefully selecting their bluffing spots, players can turn the challenges of 3-bet pots into opportunities for strategic deception. The art of bluffing in these scenarios adds a rich layer of complexity to the game, rewarding those who master its intricacies with the thrill of outsmarting their opponents. In the world of poker, 4-bet pots stand as a testament to the high stakes and intense strategy involved in the game. When a player raises, another re-raises, and yet another raises again, this sequence is known as a 4-bet. This action typically signals significant strength, narrowing the perceived range of hands that each player might hold. Navigating these scenarios requires a careful balance of aggression and caution, as the room for error is minimal. The stakes are high, and the potential for a successful bluff is rare, yet it is precisely this challenge that makes 4-bet pots a thrilling aspect of poker. The strategic implications of 4-bet pots are profound. When players engage in this level of betting, they are often committing a substantial portion of their chips. This commitment suggests that they hold premium hands, such as pocket aces, kings, or ace-king suited. As a result, bluffing in these situations requires a well-crafted narrative that can convincingly represent similar strength. The key is to tell a story that aligns with the actions taken, making the bluff believable and the threat of a strong hand credible. Constructing believable narratives in 4-bet situations hinges on understanding the dynamics of range. Players must think critically about what hands they can credibly represent and how their actions align with those hands. For example, if a player 4-bets pre-flop, they might want to continue the story by betting aggressively on a dry flop, one that is unlikely to have improved their opponent's hand. This approach can suggest a strong overpair, compelling opponents to fold weaker holdings. The art of deception lies in maintaining consistency between the story told by the bets and the perceived strength of the hand. Techniques for assessing opponents' likely responses to 4-bet bluffs involve keen observation and experience. Players must pay attention to their opponents' past behaviors and tendencies, noting how they react under pressure. Some opponents may be more prone to folding when faced with aggression, especially if they perceive the bettor to be a tight player. Others may be more suspicious and willing to call down with marginal hands. Understanding these tendencies allows players to tailor their bluffing strategies accordingly, increasing the likelihood of success. The importance of understanding range dynamics in 4-bet pots cannot be overstated. Players must be acutely aware of the range of hands their opponents might hold, as well as how their own perceived range fits into the narrative. A successful bluff in a 4-bet pot often involves representing a very narrow range of strong hands, which can be challenging but rewarding. This requires a deep understanding of poker theory and the ability to adapt to the specific context of the game. Examples of successful bluffs in 4-bet scenarios often highlight the importance of timing and psychological insight. Consider a player who 4-bets with a suited connector, such as Jack-10 of spades. The flop comes down with 2 spades and a high card, creating a potential flush draw. The player bets aggressively, representing a strong hand like pocket aces or kings. The opponent, wary of the potential strength, folds, allowing the bluffer to claim the pot. This move, grounded in careful observation and strategic aggression, demonstrates the power of a well-timed bluff in a 4-bet pot. Another scenario might involve a player who notices their opponent frequently folds to continuation bets in 4-bet pots. Sensing an opportunity, the player 4-bets with a marginal hand, such as ace-queen offsuit. The flop comes down with low, uncoordinated cards, and the player bets again, representing an overpair. The opponent, unable to withstand the pressure, folds, and the bluffer takes down the pot. This ability to exploit an opponent's tendencies is a hallmark of effective bluffing in high-stakes scenarios. Bluffing in 4-bet pots is a delicate art, requiring a balance of aggression, precision, and psychological insight. Players must navigate the complexities of these situations with a keen eye for detail and a willingness to adapt their strategies. By understanding the dynamics at play and carefully selecting their bluffing spots, players can turn the challenges of 4-bet pots into opportunities for strategic deception. The art of bluffing in these scenarios adds a rich layer of complexity to the game, rewarding those who master its intricacies with the thrill of outsmarting their opponents. In poker, bluffing with flush blockers is a subtle strategy that can greatly enhance a player's ability to deceive opponents. Flush blockers are cards in your hand that reduce the likelihood of an opponent completing a flush. For instance, if you hold the ace of hearts and the board shows 3 hearts, your ace acts as a blocker. It suggests that opponents are less likely to have the nut flush, the best possible flush. This knowledge can be leveraged to represent a strong hand, creating pressure on opponents and encouraging them to fold. Identifying optimal bluffing opportunities with flush blockers requires a keen understanding of the board and opponents' tendencies. When the board presents a potential flush draw, having a key card of that suit in your hand can be advantageous. This card not only blocks opponents from having the best flush, but also allows you to represent a stronger range. For example, if the board shows a possible flush, and you hold a high card of that suit, you can bet confidently, suggesting you have completed the flush. This strategy can be particularly effective against cautious players who fear the nuts. Techniques for representing strong hands while bluffing with blockers involve carefully crafted narratives. The story you tell with your bets must align with the strength you wish to portray. If you have a blocker to the flush, betting aggressively on the turn or river can imply you have the flush yourself. This can lead opponents to fold hands that might otherwise call. It's essential to maintain consistency in your betting patterns to reinforce the narrative of a strong hand. Opponents are more likely to believe your story if your actions align with the perceived strength of the board. The psychological effects of flush blockers on opponents' decision-making can be profound. Knowing that a key card is less likely to be in an opponent's hand can create doubt and hesitation. This uncertainty can lead opponents to question their own hand strength, especially if they hold a weaker flush or a hand that is vulnerable to a flush. By exploiting this doubt, you can induce folds from hands that might otherwise contest the pot. The psychological edge gained from using blockers effectively can turn a marginal hand into a winning one. Examples of successful bluffs utilizing flush blockers often highlight the importance of timing and board awareness. Consider a situation where the board is showing 4 hearts and you hold the king of hearts. By betting aggressively, you suggest the possibility of a flush, potentially forcing opponents to fold even strong hands like a set or a lower flush. The presence of the king of hearts in your hand acts as a powerful deterrent, convincing opponents that their hand may not be the best. Another scenario might involve a board with 2 suited cards early in the hand, with you holding a high card of that suit. As the hand progresses and the flush draw completes, an aggressive bet can represent the flush. Opponents wary of the completed draw may choose to fold hands that cannot beat a flush. This strategy requires a keen sense of timing and an understanding of opponents' tendencies to fold under pressure. Bluffing with flush blockers is a nuanced strategy that combines elements of psychology and game theory. By understanding the role of blockers and how they influence opponents' perceptions, players can craft bluffs that resonate with power and credibility. The art of using flush blockers effectively lies in the ability to tell a convincing story, one that aligns with the board texture and the actions taken. This approach adds a rich layer of complexity to bluffing, rewarding those who master it with the thrill of outsmarting their opponents. Paired boards in poker bring a distinct set of dynamics to the table, offering players the chance to craft compelling narratives that suggest trips or full houses. These boards, where 2 cards of the same rank appear, create an intriguing backdrop for bluffing. The presence of a paired board often leads opponents to reconsider the strength of their hands, opening the door for strategic deception. Understanding how to navigate these scenarios can elevate a player's bluffing game significantly. The characteristics of paired boards make them fertile ground for bluffing. When a board shows a pair, it naturally limits the number of potential strong hands available. This limitation can create uncertainty in opponents' minds, as they must consider the possibility of trips or a full house. For instance, a board showing 2 sevens and a 10 allows a player to represent a set of sevens, or even a full house with sevens over 10s. This perceived strength can pressure opponents holding marginal hands to fold. Bluffing on paired boards becomes particularly effective when opponents have shown weakness or hesitation. If an opponent checks on a paired board, it may indicate they lack a strong hand. This situation provides an opportunity to apply pressure through a well-timed bet. The key is to construct a believable story that aligns with the board's texture. For example, if you have been playing aggressively, a continuation bet on a paired board can suggest you hold a strong hand, such as trips. This narrative can compel opponents to fold hands that might otherwise contest the pot. Crafting believable stories on paired boards requires attention to detail and consistency in betting patterns. A player aiming to represent trips or a full house must consider their actions on previous streets. If you have been betting strongly, a continuation of this aggression on a paired board can reinforce the story of a powerful hand. Conversely, if you have played passively, suddenly betting aggressively on a paired board may raise suspicion. The narrative must be coherent, with each action supporting the perceived strength of your hand. Assessing opponents' likely hand ranges in paired situations is crucial for effective bluffing. Understanding what hands your opponents might have based on their actions allows you to tailor your bluffing strategy. If an opponent has shown strength pre-flop but checks on a paired board, it could indicate they missed the board entirely. This insight can guide your decision to bluff, as you can exploit their perceived weakness. Conversely, if an opponent has consistently bet into the pot, they might be holding a strong hand themselves, making a bluff less advisable. Examples of successful bluffs on paired boards often highlight the importance of timing and opponent tendencies. Consider a scenario where the board shows 2 fours and a king. If an opponent checks after raising preflop, a well-timed bet can suggest you have a king, or even a full house. This pressure can lead the opponent to fold hands like pocket jacks or queens, fearing they are beaten. The success of this bluff hinges on the opponent's perception of your hand and their willingness to fold under pressure. Another example might involve a paired board with low cards, such as 2 threes and a 7. If you have been playing passively and suddenly lead out with a bet, it can imply you have trips. Opponents holding overcards or marginal pairs may fold, unwilling to risk their chips against a perceived strong hand. The art of bluffing on paired boards lies in the ability to tell a convincing story that aligns with the board's texture and your previous actions. Bluffing on paired boards is a nuanced strategy that combines elements of psychology and game dynamics. By understanding the characteristics of these boards and crafting believable narratives, players can create pressure that leads opponents to fold. The challenge of deception, amidst the complexity of paired boards, adds depth to the art of bluffing, rewarding those who master it with the thrill of outsmarting their opponents. Ace-high boards in poker often present an intriguing opportunity for bluffing. These boards, featuring an ace as the highest card, naturally command respect and caution from players. The presence of an ace can significantly alter the perception of hand strength, making opponents wary of potential strong holdings. This dynamic creates a fertile ground for strategic deception, allowing players to exploit the board's inherent intimidation factor. The significance of ace-high boards in bluffing scenarios lies in their ability to skew perceived hand ranges. When an ace appears on the board, it is common for players to assume that someone at the table may have paired it. This assumption can lead to cautious play, as opponents fear the possibility of facing a top pair or even 2 pair. This fear can be leveraged to execute effective bluffs, particularly when opponents are unsure of your holdings. Assessing opponents' likely ranges on ace-high boards is a crucial step in crafting a successful bluff. Understanding the types of hands your opponents might hold based on their preflop actions and betting patterns is essential. For instance, if an opponent raised preflop, they might have a range that includes high cards like aces, kings, or queens. However, if they check or call on an ace-high board, it may indicate they do not have an ace, opening the door for a bluff. Techniques for executing effective bluffs on ace-high board textures involve constructing a believable narrative that aligns with the board's characteristics. One approach is the continuation bet, which can suggest you have connected with the ace. This tactic is especially effective if you are the preflop aggressor, as it aligns with the story of holding a strong starting hand. Another technique is the delayed continuation bet, where you check the flop and bet on the turn, suggesting slow-played strength. The psychological impact of bluffing on strong-looking boards like ace-high boards is profound. Opponents often experience heightened anxiety when facing bets on these boards, fearing a top pair or better. This psychological pressure can lead to folds from opponents holding weaker hands or marginal draws. The key is to maintain a consistent betting pattern that reinforces the narrative of strength, compelling opponents to fold hands they might otherwise consider playing. Examples of successful bluffs on ace-high boards often highlight the importance of reading opponents and timing. Consider a scenario where the board shows an ace, a 10, and a 5. If an opponent checks after a preflop raise, a continuation bet can suggest you have an ace, pressuring them to fold hands like pocket nines or eights. The success of this bluff depends on the opponent's perception of your hand and their willingness to fold under pressure. Another example might involve a board with an ace, a 7, and a 2. If you have been playing aggressively and continue to bet on this board, it can reinforce the story of holding an ace. Opponents holding middle pairs or overcards without an ace may choose to fold, fearing they are outmatched. The art of bluffing on ace-high boards lies in the ability to tell a convincing story that aligns with the board's texture and your previous actions. Bluffing on ace-high boards requires a blend of psychological insight and strategic execution. By understanding the dynamics of these boards and crafting believable narratives, players can create pressure that leads opponents to fold. The interplay between range dynamics and bluffing on ace-high boards offers a rich landscape for strategic play, rewarding those who master it with the thrill of outsmarting their opponents. Connected low boards in poker are those where the community cards are sequential and low in rank, such as a 2, 3, and 5. These boards can present intriguing opportunities for bluffing due to the potential for strong draws. The presence of closely ranked cards suggests the possibility of straights or strong draws, which can be leveraged to apply pressure on opponents. When faced with such a board, players often become wary of potential straights or sets, creating a fertile ground for strategic deception. The characteristics of connected low boards significantly impact bluffing strategies. These boards often miss the high card combinations that many players favor, such as aces and kings. As a result, opponents may struggle to connect with the board, making them more susceptible to bluffs. The potential for a straight or flush draw also increases the perceived strength of a player's hand, even when holding marginal cards. This dynamic can be used to create a narrative of strength, encouraging opponents to fold weaker hands. Bluffing becomes particularly effective on low-connected boards, when opponents are unlikely to have hit a strong hand. If a player raised preflop and the board comes low and connected, it is reasonable to assume they might not have connected with it. This assumption can be exploited by representing a strong draw or made hand. The fear of facing a straight or a set can lead opponents to fold hands they might otherwise consider playing. Timing and aggression are key in these situations, as they reinforce the narrative of strength. Techniques for check-raising draws and executing aggressive semi-bluffs are vital on connected low boards. A check-raise can suggest a strong hand or a powerful draw, putting opponents in a difficult position. This move is particularly effective if the opponent has shown aggression, as it forces them to reassess the strength of their hand. By executing a semi-bluff with a draw, players maintain the potential to improve while applying pressure. This dual nature of semi-bluffs makes them a versatile tool in bluffing strategies. Understanding opponents' likely hand ranges on connected boards is crucial for effective bluffing. If an opponent has been playing conservatively, they may not have connected with a low board, making them more likely to fold to aggression. Conversely, if they have been aggressive, they might have a hand that warrants caution. Assessing these tendencies helps players decide when to bluff and when to exercise restraint. Observing opponents' actions and betting patterns provides valuable insights into their likely holdings. Examples of successful bluffs on connected low boards often highlight the importance of timing and reading opponents. Consider a scenario where the board shows a 3, 4, and 6. If an opponent bets and you check raise, it can suggest a strong hand like a straight or 2 pair. The pressure of facing a potential straight can lead opponents to fold hands like pocket 7s or 8s. The success of this bluff hinges on the opponent's perception of your hand and their willingness to fold under pressure. Another example might involve a board with a 2, 5, and 6. If you have been playing aggressively and continue to bet on this board, it can reinforce the story of holding a strong hand. Opponents holding high cards or overpairs without a connection to the board may choose to fold, fearing they are outmatched. The art of bluffing on connected low boards lies in the ability to tell a convincing story that aligns with the board's texture and your previous actions. Bluffing on connected low boards requires a blend of psychological insight and strategic execution. By understanding the dynamics of these boards and crafting believable narratives, players can create pressure that leads opponents to fold. The interplay between perceived strength and actual hand potential offers a rich landscape for strategic play, rewarding those who master it with the thrill of outsmarting their opponents. In the game of poker, the turn card holds significant potential to alter the course of a hand. This fourth community card can shift the balance of power, often enhancing the range advantage for the player who has shown aggression. Understanding the implications of various turn cards is crucial for crafting effective bluffing strategies. Certain turn cards can enhance a player's perceived strength, making their narrative more convincing and putting pressure on opponents. Recognizing these opportunities allows players to exploit the dynamics of the table, turning seemingly ordinary situations into moments of strategic brilliance. Consider a scenario where the flop presents a mix of low and middle cards, such as a 3, 5, and 8. If the turn card is a king, it can significantly improve the perceived range of a player who raised preflop. This high card can suggest a strong holding, such as a top pair or a set, even if the player holds a weaker hand. The presence of a high card like a king on the turn can bolster the story of strength, making it easier to convince opponents that their hands are inferior. This perceived strength can be leveraged to apply pressure, forcing opponents to reconsider their positions. Assessing the impact of turn cards on both players' ranges is essential for informed decision-making. When a turn card aligns with the narrative of a strong hand, it can create opportunities for aggressive play. For instance, if a player holds a drawing hand, like a flush draw or straight draw, and the turn card completes a potential flush or straight, it can dramatically shift the perceived range advantage. Opponents may become wary of these possibilities, leading them to fold marginal hands that might have been contenders on the flop. This shift in perception can be exploited to maximize the effectiveness of a bluff. Techniques for leveraging advantageous turn cards involve a keen understanding of opponents' tendencies and the ability to adapt strategy accordingly. When a favorable turn card appears, it is crucial to assess the opponent's likely response. If they have shown signs of weakness or hesitation, a well-timed bluff can capitalize on their uncertainty. By betting or raising on a turn that improves your perceived range, you can create a narrative that suggests a strong hand, compelling opponents to fold. The key is to maintain consistency in your story, aligning your actions with the board's texture to reinforce the illusion of strength. The psychological effects of turn cards on opponents' decision-making cannot be overstated. A turn card that completes a potential draw or introduces a high card can instill doubt and fear in opponents. They may question the strength of their own hands, especially if they have not connected with the board. This doubt can be leveraged to create pressure, encouraging folds from opponents who might otherwise continue in the hand. The ability to read these psychological cues and respond with calculated aggression is a hallmark of successful bluffing. Situations where bluffing becomes particularly effective after a favorable turn often involve opponents who have shown reluctance or caution. If an opponent checks or makes a small bet on the turn, it can indicate a lack of confidence in their hand. This hesitation can be exploited by representing a strong hand that aligns with the turn card. For example, if the turn completes a possible flush and the opponent has not shown aggression, a bluff suggesting a completed flush can induce folds. The timing of the bluff, combined with the turn card's impact, creates a powerful narrative that can sway the outcome of the hand. The art of bluffing on the turn requires a blend of strategic foresight and psychological acumen. By understanding which turn cards enhance your perceived range, you can craft compelling stories that manipulate opponents' perceptions. The ability to recognize and exploit these moments adds depth to the game, rewarding players who master the subtleties of turn card dynamics. As players refine their skills in leveraging turn cards, they gain a valuable tool in their poker arsenal, capable of shifting the balance of power and creating thrilling moments of deception. In poker, the river card is the final opportunity to shape the narrative of a hand. It often plays a pivotal role in completing perceived strong holdings, making it a critical element in bluffing strategies. A well-chosen river card can enhance the believability of a bluff, leading opponents to fold hands they might otherwise play. Understanding the implications of river cards allows players to craft compelling stories that can sway the outcome of a hand. Certain river cards naturally enhance bluffing potential by completing possible straights or flushes. For instance, if the board shows 4 cards to a flush or a straight, the final card that completes these draws can dramatically alter the perceived strength of a player's hand. An opponent facing a potential flush or straight may hesitate to call, fearing that their hand is no longer the best. This hesitation can be exploited by a strategic bluff, suggesting a completed draw that pressures the opponent into folding. Reading opponents' likely ranges based on river cards is essential for informed bluffing. If an opponent has been passive throughout the hand, a river card that completes a potential draw can be used to represent a strong holding. For example, if the board has 3 hearts and the river brings a 4th, players can convincingly represent a flush. Observing opponents' betting patterns and reactions to previous community cards helps in assessing their likely holdings. This insight allows players to tailor their bluffs to the perceived strength of opponents' ranges. Constructing believable narratives with river cards involves aligning betting actions with the board's texture. A player who has shown aggression on earlier streets can use a river card to reinforce a story of strength. If the river card completes a possible flush or straight, a well-timed bet can suggest that the player has hit their draw. This narrative consistency is crucial for convincing opponents of the bluff's legitimacy. The key is to ensure that the story aligns with previous actions, creating a seamless progression that opponents find credible. The relationship between river cards and opponents' perceived strength plays a significant role in bluffing success. A river card that completes a potential draw can shift the perceived strength of a player's hand, putting opponents in a difficult position. They must decide whether to call a bet with a hand that may have been strong on the turn, but is now potentially beaten. This dynamic creates an opportunity for skilled players to apply pressure and induce folds, capitalizing on the uncertainty introduced by the river card. Bluffing on the river becomes particularly advantageous in situations where opponents have shown reluctance or caution. If an opponent checks the river, it may indicate a lack of confidence in their hand. This is an opportune moment to execute a bluff, especially if the river card completes a possible draw. A player can bet confidently, suggesting that the river card improved their hand. This move can lead to successful bluffs, as opponents may fold hands that cannot beat a perceived strong holding. The art of bluffing on the river requires a blend of strategic foresight and psychological insight. By understanding which river cards enhance perceived range, players can craft stories that manipulate opponents' perceptions. The ability to recognize and exploit these moments adds depth to the game, rewarding players who master the subtleties of river card dynamics. As players refine their skills in leveraging river cards, they gain a valuable tool in their poker arsenal, capable of shifting the balance of power and creating thrilling moments of deception. In poker, balancing bluff frequency with value bets is a fundamental component of a successful strategy. This balance ensures that players maintain credibility at the table, preventing opponents from easily reading their intentions. The interplay between bluffs and value bets creates a dynamic that keeps opponents on their toes, unable to predict whether a player is holding a strong hand or bluffing. By mastering this balance, players can maximize their profits while minimizing the risk of being exploited. To achieve this balance, players must first understand the concept of bluffing frequency. Bluffing too often can lead to predictability, allowing opponents to call more frequently and diminish the effectiveness of bluffs. Conversely, bluffing too rarely can result in missed opportunities to capitalize on opponents' weaknesses. The key is to find an optimal frequency that keeps opponents guessing without overcommitting to bluffs that may not succeed. Calculating the optimal bluffing frequency involves a keen awareness of game dynamics. Players must consider factors such as table image, opponent tendencies, and the specific context of the hand. For example, against opponents who are more inclined to fold, a higher bluffing frequency may be effective. Conversely, against opponents who call frequently, a more conservative approach may be warranted. By adjusting bluffing frequency based on these dynamics, players can enhance their overall strategy. Integrating value bets into bluffing strategies is another critical aspect of maintaining balance. Value bets are made with the intention of extracting maximum value from opponents when holding a strong hand. By effectively mixing bluffs and value bets, players can create a narrative that is difficult for opponents to decipher. This integration involves betting in a way that is consistent across both bluffs and value hands, ensuring that opponents cannot easily distinguish between the two. The psychological impact of balanced play on opponents' perceptions is significant. When players maintain a consistent and balanced approach, opponents are more likely to second-guess their decisions, unsure of whether they are facing a bluff or a strong hand. This uncertainty can lead to mistakes, such as folding strong hands or calling with weak ones. By leveraging this psychological effect, players can gain an edge over their opponents. Examples of successful strategies that maintain a healthy bluff-to-value ratio can be seen in various poker scenarios. For instance, a player who consistently bets 2/3 of the pot with both bluffs and value hands creates a pattern that is difficult for opponents to read. This consistency forces opponents to rely on their own hand strength rather than trying to interpret the player's intentions. Over time, this approach can lead to increased profits, as opponents make errors based on their uncertainty. In addition to maintaining balance, players must also be adaptable. The effectiveness of bluffing frequency and value betting can vary depending on the specific opponents and the flow of the game. Players must be willing to adjust their strategies as needed, taking into account changes in opponent behavior and table dynamics. This adaptability ensures that players remain unpredictable and difficult to exploit. The art of balancing bluff frequency with value bets is not only about numbers and calculations. It is also about understanding the psychology of opponents and using that knowledge to one's advantage. By creating a strategy that is both consistent and adaptable, players can keep opponents guessing and maintain an edge at the poker table. This balance is a cornerstone of successful poker play, allowing players to navigate the complexities of the game with confidence and precision. Planning a hand with bluffing lines in mind begins with the preflop decision. This stage sets the foundation for potential bluffs later in the hand. Choosing which hands to play and how to play them can dictate the narrative you'll craft as the hand unfolds. Consider your position at the table, the tendencies of your opponents, and your own table image. In early position, tighter play may be prudent, but in late position, you can afford to open with a wider range, including hands that can be used for bluffing. This flexibility allows you to represent a variety of strong hands on future streets, setting the stage for effective bluffs. Identifying potential bluffing lines involves analyzing the board texture as the community cards are revealed. A dry board with few draws often misses many opponents' ranges, creating a prime opportunity for bluffing. Conversely, a wet board with many draws may require a more cautious approach, as opponents are more likely to have connected with the board. As you assess the flop, consider how the board interacts with your perceived range and your opponent's likely ranges. This assessment will guide your decision on whether to continue with a bluff or adjust your strategy. Adapting strategies as the hand progresses is crucial. Each street offers new information that can influence your bluffing decisions. On the flop, a continuation bet can maintain the initiative and pressure opponents. If called, the turn presents another opportunity to reassess. A favorable turn card that improves your perceived range can justify a second barrel, reinforcing the story of a strong hand. However, if the turn card is unfavorable, it may be wise to check and reevaluate your position. The psychological benefits of having a clear plan in mind cannot be overstated. When you approach a hand with a well-thought-out strategy, it instills confidence and reduces the likelihood of emotional decisions. This clarity allows you to remain composed, even when faced with unexpected developments. By anticipating potential scenarios, you can react calmly and adjust your strategy without hesitation. This mental preparedness is a key component of successful bluffing, as it enables you to maintain control over the narrative you are presenting to your opponents. Examples of hands where planned bluffing lines led to success often involve a cohesive story that aligns with the board texture and opponents' perceptions. Imagine holding a suited connector in late position, opening with a raise, and receiving calls from the blinds. The flop comes with two cards of your suit, offering a flush draw. A continuation bet here can represent a strong hand, such as an overpair or a set. When the turn brings another card of your suit, completing the flush, a second bet can reinforce the narrative of strength. Even if the river does not improve your hand, a final bluff can persuade opponents to fold, believing you have the flush. In another scenario, consider holding a low pocket pair in early position. After raising pre-flop and receiving a call, the flop comes with high cards that miss your hand. A continuation bet can still represent a strong hand, such as a high pocket pair. If the turn brings another high card, continuing the bluff can suggest a set or two pair. By the river, opponents facing a third bet may fold, convinced of your strength. Planning a hand with bluffing lines in mind requires a blend of foresight, adaptability, and psychological insight. By structuring your play from pre-flop to river, you can create a narrative that supports your bluffs and maximizes your chances of success. This strategic approach not only enhances your bluffing effectiveness, but also enriches your overall poker experience. Recognizing when to abandon a bluff is a vital skill in poker. It requires a keen awareness of the table dynamics and the ability to read subtle cues from opponents. One common sign that a bluff should be reconsidered is an unexpected raise from an opponent. This aggressive action often indicates a strong hand or a willingness to challenge your perceived strength. When faced with such resistance, it may be prudent to fold and preserve your chips for future opportunities. Interpreting opponents' betting patterns is another crucial aspect of knowing when to let go of a bluff. Consistent betting or raising can suggest confidence in their hand. If an opponent who typically plays passively suddenly becomes aggressive, it could be a sign that they have connected well with the board. Observing these shifts in behavior can provide valuable insights into the strength of their hand, guiding your decision to continue or abandon the bluff. Body language, although more relevant in live poker, can also offer clues about an opponent's hand strength. Signs of discomfort, such as fidgeting or avoiding eye contact, might indicate weakness. Conversely, a relaxed demeanor or confident posture could suggest strength. While these tells are not foolproof, they can complement other information gathered during the hand, helping you decide whether to proceed with the bluff. Assessing the strength of opponents' hands involves considering the board texture and how it interacts with their likely ranges. If the board is particularly favorable for your opponent's range, it might be wise to abandon the bluff. For instance, if you are bluffing on a board with a possible flush or straight, and your opponent has shown interest, they might have completed their draw. In such cases, continuing the bluff could be costly. The psychological impact of recognizing when to fold a bluff should not be underestimated. Letting go of a bluff requires discipline and emotional control. It can be tempting to continue bluffing in the hope that opponents will fold, but this can lead to unnecessary losses. By acknowledging the signs that a bluff is unlikely to succeed, you can make rational decisions that protect your bankroll and maintain your composure. Examples of situations where abandoning a bluff proved beneficial often involve a well-timed retreat that saves chips. Consider a scenario where you raise preflop with a marginal hand, and the flop comes with high cards that miss your range. You decide to bluff with a continuation bet, but an opponent raises. Recognizing their strength, you fold, preserving your stack for a more favorable situation. In another example, imagine you are in a multiway pot with a weak hand. The board develops into a coordinated texture with potential straights and flushes. You attempt a bluff, but one opponent calls and another raises. Sensing that at least one of them has a strong hand, you decide to fold. This decision prevents further losses and allows you to remain in the game. Recognizing when to abandon a bluff adds depth to your strategic repertoire. By paying attention to opponents' reactions, betting patterns, and the evolving board, you can make informed decisions about when to let go of a bluff. This skill not only protects your chips, but also enhances your ability to adapt and thrive in the dynamic environment of poker. Tilt in poker refers to a state of emotional frustration or agitation that can lead to poor decision-making. It often arises after a significant loss or a failed bluff, causing players to deviate from their usual strategic approach. When on tilt, a player might act impulsively, chasing losses with reckless bets, or engaging in aggressive play without proper consideration. This emotional state can quickly erode a bankroll and undermine a player's ability to compete effectively. Several triggers can lead to tilt, each affecting players differently. A common catalyst is a bad beat, where an opponent wins with a weaker hand due to an unexpected turn of events. This can be particularly frustrating when a player has made all the right moves but still loses. Another trigger is the pressure of high-stakes situations, such as final tables or significant tournaments, where the fear of losing can exacerbate emotional responses. Additionally, prolonged periods of poor luck or a series of unsuccessful bluffs can chip away at a player's confidence, leading to tilt. To manage emotions and maintain composure, players can employ several techniques. Deep breathing exercises can help slow the heart rate and reduce anxiety, allowing for clearer thinking. Taking a short break from the table to regain focus can also be beneficial. This pause provides an opportunity to reset mentally and approach the game with renewed clarity. Visualization techniques, where players imagine successful outcomes and positive scenarios, can reinforce confidence and reduce negative emotions. Bankroll management is crucial in mitigating the effects of tilt. By setting strict limits on how much they are willing to lose in a session, players can protect themselves from the financial consequences of emotional play. This discipline ensures that even if a player experiences tilt, their losses remain manageable and do not jeopardize their overall financial health. A well-maintained bankroll allows players to continue competing without the added pressure of financial strain. Examples of successful recovery after a bluffing setback often involve players recognizing their emotional state and taking proactive steps to address it. Consider a player who has just lost a large pot due to a failed bluff. Instead of immediately trying to recoup the losses with aggressive plays, they take a moment to assess their emotions. By acknowledging their frustration and employing calming techniques, they can return to the table with a clear head, ready to make rational decisions. In another instance, a player might experience a series of bad beats that lead to mounting frustration. Recognizing the onset of tilt, they decide to take a break, stepping away from the table to clear their mind. During this time, they remind themselves of past successes and the importance of sticking to their strategy. When they return, they are more composed and able to focus on the game without being driven by emotion. Avoiding tilt and protecting your bankroll are essential components of successful poker play. By understanding the triggers of tilt and implementing strategies to manage emotions, players can maintain their focus and make informed decisions. This resilience not only preserves financial stability, but also enhances a player's ability to navigate the complexities of poker with clarity and confidence. Bluffing in poker involves presenting a false narrative to opponents, creating the illusion of a stronger hand than one actually holds. This strategy is an accepted part of the game, rooted in the understanding that deception is a tool for gaining an edge. However, the line between ethical bluffing and unethical tactics can be thin, requiring players to navigate their strategies with care. Ethical bluffing is considered a legitimate part of poker, relying on the skill of misdirection without breaking the rules or exploiting opponents unfairly. It involves reading the table, understanding opponents' tendencies, and crafting a believable story through betting patterns. Unethical tactics, often referred to as angle shooting, involve exploiting loopholes or bending the rules to gain an unfair advantage. These tactics might include misleading opponents about the action, using ambiguous gestures, or intentionally misrepresenting the strength of one's hand in a way that goes beyond the accepted norms of bluffing. Such actions can damage the integrity of the game, leading to disputes and a breakdown of trust at the table. Players who engage in angle shooting risk alienating themselves from the poker community, as these tactics are generally frowned upon. Cultural perspectives on bluffing ethics can vary, influencing how players perceive and engage in the art of deception. In some cultures, bluffing is celebrated as a demonstration of wit and strategic prowess, while in others, it may be viewed with suspicion or disdain. These cultural differences can affect players' approaches to the game and their interactions with opponents. Understanding these perspectives can help players navigate international poker environments, fostering respect and sportsmanship across diverse settings. Maintaining integrity while bluffing involves adhering to the spirit of fair play and respecting opponents. Players can achieve this by being transparent about their actions and avoiding deceptive tactics that cross ethical boundaries. For example, a player might choose to bluff by representing a strong hand through consistent betting patterns, rather than relying on verbal misdirection or ambiguous gestures. By focusing on strategic play and respecting the rules, players can enjoy the challenge of bluffing without compromising their integrity. The psychological effects of ethical considerations in gameplay can influence both the bluffer and their opponents. A player who bluffs ethically can build a reputation for honesty and skill, earning respect from peers and enhancing their credibility at the table. Conversely, opponents may feel more comfortable engaging with a player known for fair play, leading to a more enjoyable and competitive atmosphere. This mutual respect can elevate the overall experience, fostering a sense of camaraderie and sportsmanship. Examples of ethical dilemmas in bluffing often arise in situations where the rules are ambiguous or open to interpretation. Consider a scenario where a player makes a verbal declaration that is misleading but not explicitly against the rules. This action may lead to confusion among opponents, raising questions about the player's intentions. In such cases, the ethical course of action would be to clarify the situation and ensure that all players understand the true state of the hand. By prioritizing transparency and fairness, players can navigate these dilemmas with integrity. Another example might involve a player who uses ambiguous gestures to suggest a fold, only to later claim they intended to remain in the hand. This tactic can create confusion and disrupt the flow of the game, leading to disputes and potential conflicts. Ethical players avoid such actions, choosing instead to communicate clearly and honestly with their opponents. By maintaining a commitment to fair play, players can uphold the integrity of the game and ensure a positive experience for all participants. In conclusion, ethical considerations in bluffing are essential for preserving the integrity and enjoyment of poker. By understanding the difference between strategic deception and unethical tactics, players can navigate their strategies with confidence and respect. Embracing the principles of fair play and transparency allows players to enjoy the thrill of bluffing while maintaining the trust and camaraderie of the poker community. Reviewing hand histories is a powerful method for improving poker skills, particularly in the art of bluffing. By examining past bluffs, players can gain insight into their decision-making processes and identify areas for refinement. This practice allows players to track the effectiveness of their bluffs, understand the dynamics at play during each hand, and learn from both successes and failures. Hand history reviews provide a concrete record of gameplay, offering a detailed look at the nuances of each decision and its impact on the outcome. When analyzing bluffing decisions in past hands, it is essential to focus on several key factors. First, consider the context of the hand, including position, stack sizes, and the tendencies of opponents. Understanding these elements can shed light on why a bluff was chosen and whether it was executed effectively. Next, evaluate the board texture and how it influenced the perceived strength of your hand. A dry board might have been an ideal setting for a bluff, whereas a coordinated board could have complicated the narrative you were trying to construct. Identifying patterns and trends in bluffing outcomes is crucial for recognizing strengths and weaknesses in your strategy. Look for recurring situations where bluffs were successful or failed. This might include specific board textures, opponent types, or bet sizes that consistently led to favorable results. By pinpointing these patterns, players can adjust their strategies to capitalize on effective bluffing scenarios while avoiding less successful ones. This systematic approach to analysis helps build a more robust and adaptable bluffing strategy over time. The psychological benefits of reflecting on gameplay experiences should not be underestimated. Reviewing hand histories fosters a deeper understanding of personal tendencies and biases, allowing players to approach future games with greater self-awareness. This reflection can also boost confidence, as players become more familiar with their decision-making processes and learn to trust their instincts. Additionally, the practice of self-review encourages a growth mindset, where mistakes are viewed as opportunities for learning rather than failures. Examples of successful adjustments made through hand reviews are plentiful. A player might discover that their bluffing frequency was too high, leading to increased calls from observant opponents. By recognizing this pattern, they can adjust their strategy to include more value bets, balancing their range and enhancing their credibility. Alternatively, a player might notice that their bluffs are more successful when executed from late position, prompting them to focus on capitalizing on positional advantages in future games. In some cases, hand history reviews reveal subtle tells or timing patterns that opponents have exploited. By identifying these weaknesses, players can work on concealing their intentions more effectively, reducing the likelihood of being read by skilled opponents. This continuous process of analysis and adjustment helps players refine their bluffing techniques and develop a more sophisticated approach to the game. Hand history reviews are not limited to personal reflection. Engaging in discussions with fellow players or coaches can provide additional perspectives and insights. These conversations can highlight aspects of a hand that may have been overlooked and offer new strategies for future play. Sharing experiences and learning from others fosters a collaborative environment where knowledge is exchanged freely, benefiting all participants. The practice of reviewing hand histories is an essential component of poker development, particularly for those seeking to master the art of bluffing. By analyzing past bluffs, identifying patterns, and reflecting on gameplay experiences, players can refine their strategies and enhance their understanding of effective bluffing techniques. This ongoing process of self-review fosters a deeper connection to the game and encourages continuous learning, paving the way for long-term success at the poker table. A practical bluffing checklist serves as a valuable tool for poker players, offering a structured approach to decision-making at the table. The first essential element to include in a bluffing checklist is the assessment of table dynamics. This involves observing opponents' tendencies, noting who plays aggressively and who tends to fold under pressure. Understanding these dynamics helps in predicting how opponents might react to a bluff, allowing for more informed decisions. Next, consider the importance of position. Being in a late position offers significant advantages, as it provides the opportunity to observe opponents' actions before making a move. This vantage point allows players to craft more convincing bluffs, as they can tailor their strategy based on the information gathered. Including position as a key factor in the checklist ensures that players are always aware of the strategic edge it provides. Hand selection is another critical component. Not all hands are suitable for bluffing. Choosing hands that have potential to improve or contain blockers can increase the success rate of a bluff. For instance, having a high card like an ace or king can serve as a blocker, making it less likely that opponents hold a strong hand. Including hand selection criteria in the checklist helps players identify optimal bluffing opportunities. Board texture plays a pivotal role in bluffing effectiveness. Dry boards with few draws are often better suited for bluffs, as they are less likely to connect with opponents' ranges. Conversely, wet boards with multiple draws can complicate the bluffing narrative. By assessing board texture, players can determine whether a bluff is likely to be credible. This consideration is a vital part of any bluffing checklist. Bet sizing is also crucial. The size of a bet can influence opponents' perceptions of hand strength. Small bets may not be taken seriously, while overly large bets can appear suspicious. Finding the right balance is key. Including guidelines for bet sizing in the checklist ensures that players maintain credibility and consistency in their bluffing strategy. Tailoring a checklist to individual playing styles enhances its effectiveness. Aggressive players might focus on identifying more bluffing spots, while conservative players might emphasize the importance of timing and selectivity. Personalizing the checklist allows players to align it with their natural tendencies, making it a more intuitive tool during gameplay. Implementing the checklist during play requires practice and discipline. Players should familiarize themselves with the checklist before sitting at the table, committing key points to memory. During a hand, quick mental checks against the list can guide decision-making without disrupting the flow of the game. Over time, this process becomes second nature, allowing for seamless integration into gameplay. The psychological benefits of having a structured approach are significant. A checklist provides clarity and confidence, reducing the mental load of decision-making under pressure. Knowing that each bluff is backed by a thoughtful process can alleviate anxiety and enhance focus. This mental framework supports players in staying calm and collected, even in high-stakes situations. Examples of successful bluffs guided by a checklist are plentiful. Consider a scenario where a player, in late position, notices that opponents have been folding frequently to aggression. The player holds a hand with an ace blocker on a dry board. By following the checklist, the player decides to execute a bluff with a well-sized bet, capitalizing on the observed table dynamics and board texture. The bluff succeeds, as the opponents fold, unable to justify a call against the perceived strength. In another instance, a conservative player might use the checklist to identify a rare bluffing opportunity. After observing a tight opponent who rarely defends blinds, the player finds themselves in a favorable position with a hand that has potential blockers. The checklist guides the decision to bluff, resulting in a fold and a successful steal of the pot. Building a practical bluffing checklist is an exercise in strategic preparation. By outlining essential elements, tailoring it to individual styles, and practicing its implementation, players can enhance their bluffing game significantly. The checklist becomes a trusted companion, guiding players through the complexities of poker with confidence and clarity. Confidence in poker is a subtle yet powerful force. It influences not only the player, but also the perceptions of opponents. A confident player exudes an aura of certainty that can sway the dynamics at the table. This confidence is not loud or brash. It is quiet and composed. It is the kind of confidence that allows a player to make bold moves without hesitation. This quiet confidence is crucial for successful bluffing. It helps create a believable narrative that opponents find hard to challenge. Developing a calm and composed mindset requires practice and self-awareness. One technique is focusing on breathing. Deep, steady breaths can help maintain calmness. This practice keeps the mind clear and reduces anxiety. Another technique is visualization. Before sitting at the table, visualize successful bluffs. Imagine the scenarios where your confidence leads to opponents folding. This mental rehearsal builds a foundation of assurance. It prepares you for real-life situations where bluffing is necessary. Balancing aggression with patience is key in bluffing scenarios. Aggression without control can lead to reckless plays. Patience without action can result in missed opportunities. The balance lies in knowing when to strike and when to wait. Observing opponents' tendencies can guide this balance. If an opponent shows signs of weakness, a well-timed aggressive bluff can be effective. If the table is full of cautious players, patience might yield better results. Understanding the rhythm of the game allows for this balance. The psychological impact of self-assurance on opponents is profound. A player who acts with quiet confidence can make opponents second-guess their decisions. This self-assurance suggests that the player knows something they do not. It creates doubt and hesitation in opponents' minds. This doubt can lead them to fold stronger hands, fearing the confident player holds the nuts. The perception of strength, even if unfounded, can be a powerful tool in poker. Examples of successful bluffs executed with quiet confidence abound. Consider a scenario where a player faces a tough decision on the river. The board is a mix of high and low cards, and the pot is significant. The player, holding only a marginal hand, decides to bluff. They calmly place a large bet, maintaining eye contact with opponents. Their demeanor suggests they hold the winning hand. The opponents, unsure and wary of the confident bet, fold one by one. The bluff succeeds not because of the cards but because of the player's quiet confidence. In another instance, a player in a late position notices the table's passive play. They seize the moment to bluff, betting aggressively on a dry board. Their calm and assured manner leaves little room for doubt. The opponents, sensing the player's confidence, fold despite potentially having better hands. The bluff works because the player exudes certainty and control. Quiet confidence in bluffing is not about being fearless. It is about being aware of the situation and trusting your instincts. It is about projecting strength through calmness and composure. This confidence does not come overnight. It is cultivated through experience, practice, and a deep understanding of the game. Players who embrace this mindset find themselves bluffing more effectively. They navigate the complexities of poker with poise, turning the art of deception into a strategic advantage.